Chapter 374. Seemingly noticing List's hesitation, Captain Lydon approached and reminded him in a low voice, "Sir Captain, the Grand Duke's order is not to accept prisoners." As long as the Grand Duke's dragon was still alive, he was still the sole authority of the Grand Duchy of Sapphire. Of course, List would not let his conscience get the better of him and release these people. From the moment they decided to resist, it was a battle to the death. Traitors could not be forgiven. They could only blame themselves for following the wrong lord and not being able to repent in time. List's gaze swept over the group of people kneeling on one knee. He slowly said, "Captain Lydon, give each of them a chance to write a will, hand over the sprite, and then let them commit suicide. Copperfield and Nash, take over the castle and clean up the threat. We will rest in the castle for a day. Marcus, lead the night squad and follow me outside for a patrol." He no longer asked how the surrendered knight would commit suicide. List went straight to the barley field on the other side of the castle. According to the information revealed by the rats, the barley field was breeding a sprite worm. He was going to secretly contract the sprite worm as his personal trophy. No one else knew about the sprite worm, therefore swallowing it would not be a problem. The barley field was very easy to find. After releasing magic eyes to survey the area, he quickly found the protected barley worm stalk. The barley worm had yet to be born, but it should be soon. It might be born in 1 or 2 days. Finding the sprite worm yet being unable to immediately take it away, made List a bit vexed. He was still anxious to rush to Oxhair City to join the Count and sweep away Count Snade's orders of chivalry and plunder military exploits. He had no time to stay here. However, since he did not intend to leave today, then he could still wait. He thought, if the barley worm is born before tomorrow morning, I will immediately contract it. If it is not born before tomorrow morning, then I will have Marcus temporarily stay here to take care of the wounded. After the barley worm is born, I will dig out the worm stalk and bring it with me. Digging out the worm stalk was very troublesome and might even harm the worm stalk itself. The best way was to bestow a contract with a subordinate and then let the sprite worm migrate the worm stalk. The sprite worm could be bestowed as a reward to a follower. But usually no lord was willing to do so. This was because sprite worms could only contract twice. Since the lord had already contracted once, the sprite worm could only contract once more after dissolving the contract. Otherwise its value would be greatly reduced. The sprite worms sold on the market were wild sprite worms that had not been contracted. The barley sprite worm before him clearly met the conditions for a reward. However, List was not willing to give it to his subordinates. He would rather give his subordinates a large sum of gold coins to buy sprite worms than to give away the sprite worms he encountered. "Philip, take 2 squires with you and wait here. Pay close attention to the birth of the barley worm." "Yes, my lord." After inspecting the barley worm stalk, List quickly led the night squad back to the castle. At that moment, the castle had been changed to a black tulip flag. Captain Lydon came over to greet him. "Sir Commander, all of the Main City Knight have committed suicide." A group of civilians from Main City hurried over and buried the corpses. The inventory of the castle's storehouse has already begun. There is enough food and water, but there are no sprite worms. "There aren't any?" "Yes, these knight received the news and have long since transferred their sprite worms to their wives and children. As for their wives and children, we did not inquire about them. After all, sprite worms cannot be contracted a 3rd time." List nodded. These night squad had clearly been prepared. It was unknown how many benefits Marquis Bull had promised them to dare to defend Ironhoof Island at the risk of opposing Sapphire Grand Duke. Under normal circumstances, apart from Marquis Bull's diehard followers, the other aristocrats should have long since surrendered and welcomed the imperial army. After all, the Grand Duke had a dragon. Perhaps the news brought by the rat was true. Great lords like Snade, whose children were by Marquis Bull's side and their wealth had probably been transferred to Ironhoof City, could only choose to be loyal and not dare to betray Marquis Bull. After betraying Marquis Bull, they would lose everything. They could only hope that after this success, they would continue to gain glory. List did not know what these night squad were thinking, nor did he want to know. He had come here to render meritorious service. With a lord like Snade vowing to resist to the death, it would be convenient for him to fight for glory. He had already arranged for 2 Earth Knights to rush to Oxhair City at top speed to report to Count Lee William the information he had obtained. A wizard had secretly communicated with Snade, mentioning a major event and threatening to promote Snade to the rank of Marquis after the success. As for what this major event was, it was still unclear. It was better to let the Count worry about it. As he followed Captain Lydon into the nameless castle, a stench of excrement and urine assailed his nostrils, making him want to vomit. There were probably too many people living here, resulting in the stench inside the castle. It was like a castle-style toilet. Get someone to clean up the third floor I live in immediately. The third floor was continuously washed clean of the filth in the corridors and rooms. Although there was still a faint stench that could not be dispelled, it was still barely habitable. List sat behind a desk that originally belonged to an aristocrat. He listened to Captain Lydon and the others report on the spoils of war. As a small city, the spoils of war in Oxhair City were not very abundant, especially when the elves had long been moved away. Finally he thought for a moment and gave an order: divide the gold coins evenly. Remember, tell all the knight to keep their mouths shut and keep their share of the gold coins. This was dividing the spoils of war privately, which was against the Grand Duke's order. However, Count Lee William had said before that the looting of the spoils of war should be restrained, but he did not strictly forbid it. This kind of thing could not be prohibited. In a war with no profits, why should the knight contribute? After all, the lord and knight provided the equipment and logistics themselves, including their own lives. No one would believe that they could get their share after handing the spoils of war to the Grand Duke. The Grand Duke would definitely favor the Blue Blood Alliance. Captain Lydon replied with a smile, "Commander, all the knight knows that they should keep their mouths shut after getting the benefits." List nodded. "Replenish the lost weapons from Oxhair City, and replenish the consumed food from here as well. Right, call Marcus for me." Marcus quickly arrived. List motioned for him to close the door first and then said, "Teacher Marcus, I have a task for you. Go to Oxhair City and search for craftsmen. Forget about ordinary craftsmen, but they must be craftsmen or above, especially craftsmen such as papersmiths and salt makers that the Flower Town does not have." Marcus asked, "Sir, can we take these craftsmen with us? Tell them that after the fall of Ironhoof Island, everyone will bear the wrath of the Grand Duke, because they are all sinful traitors. The Flower Town can provide them with better shelter. As for taking them away, the sea is so vast that they can always be sent to the ship." It was very difficult to take away a large number of supplies from the island without passing through the port. However, it was not very difficult to take away a few craftsmen and their families. Chapter 375. Sitting in the study and looking at the environment outside the window that was different from the Flower Town, List couldn't help but struggle for a moment with the revulsion of killing. In the end, he used reason to overcome his chaotic emotions, focused his mind, and called out the smoke mission. Mission completed. Reward: a low-level dragon species World of Warcraft Chocobo. Obviously. Among the Earth Knights killed by List, there was an elite Earth Knight, so the mission was determined to be completed. But he was a bit puzzled. What is a Chocobo? It feels like a low-level ostrich-like dragon? Whether it was an ostrich-like or not, a low-level dragon was a valuable prize. I wonder how this Chocobo will become my reward. He only planned to stay in the castle for one day. However, the surroundings had already been checked, and there was no trace of a Chocobo. Fortunately, List wasn't in a hurry. As long as it was a smoke mission reward, it would always find the right time to pull the threads of fate and intersect with a Chocobo. He began to check the new mission, and after reading its contents, his eyes lit up. Mission: victory in the first battle. The loser will have to give up everything and the winner will have everything. Complete a thorough search of this castle. Everything obtained will be considered as spoils of war, including the treasures in the underground vault. Reward: a lesser elven soldier. Lesser elven soldier? This was a weapon that sounded interesting but was in fact very cruel. It was because fairies had to be killed and soaked in their blood in order to be made into lesser elven soldiers. After absorbing the magic power from the blood of fairies, the lesser elven soldier would undergo a special change. According to value, a lesser elven soldier could be sold for a dragon coin, which was tens of thousands of gold coins. But to make a beautiful thing like fairies into a weapon was very cruel. List would never do such a thing, but he wouldn't give up on the lesser elven soldiers that he had already made. Not all of the spoils of war in the castle will be mine, they have to be sealed and handed over to the Grand Duke. That doesn't prevent me from taking away the most valuable things. It seems that the lesser elven soldier is in the underground warehouse. He immediately called for Captain Lydon. When you searched the castle, did you find the underground warehouse? Captain Lydon shook his head. We only found a storeroom filled with wheat flour and jerky. We didn't find any underground storerooms. I suspect that there is an underground vault in this castle. Send someone to search carefully and inform me as soon as you find it. With his subordinates instructing him, List didn't need to search by himself. Very soon. Captain Lydon excitedly reported, Captain, your guess is very accurate. You really found the underground warehouse. The underground warehouse was next to the entrance of the underground tunnel. It was disguised as a wooden wall, but after removing the wooden wall, there was a sturdy stone door inside. There was a special lock on the stone door, and the knight was looking for the key. Sir, the key has not been found yet. Don't bother looking, just smash it open. List suspected that this group of knight had no brains. They were all Earth Knight with a body full of do chi. It was not their own castle, so they could just demolish it with brute force. After receiving List's reminder, the two Earth Knights immediately found a few broken knight spears, poured their fighting energy into them, and started to dismantle the stone door. No matter how sturdy the stone door was after being destroyed by the Earth Knights, it would still collapse. Very soon a pitch-black tunnel was revealed, leading deep underground. List asked someone to bring a torch and shone it into the tunnel. It was surrounded by rough stone walls. There was no sign of any mechanism, and with the rough workmanship of this castle, it did not seem like there would be any mechanism. An Earth Knight was sent to take the lead, and List followed closely behind. He found that the tunnel was much shorter than he had imagined. After turning a corner, he directly reached the underground warehouse. The area was not very big and it was only a very small warehouse. There were a few rows of holes on the walls of the warehouse, and there were 8 wooden boxes. Open one of the boxes and take a look. List ordered. The Earth Knight immediately pulled out the wooden box and used the knight spear to smash the lock on it. He opened the lid and immediately silver coins were reflected under the light of the torch. It was a box that stored silver coins. Looking at the number, there were at least a few thousand silver coins. It was equivalent to dozens of gold coins. Silver coins are also worth storing in a box? List was speechless. Usually, the boxes that were hidden in a secret room would be filled with gold when they were opened. The Earth Knight was very excited. Leader, can we divide these silver coins? As long as you can take it away, I don't mind if you divide it. Thank you, Leader. Your generosity is admirable. The Earth Knight wanted to immediately grab a handful of silver coins and stuff them into his clothes. However, he restrained himself and pulled out the second box and opened it again. It was still a box of silver coins. There were 4 consecutive boxes and all of them were silver coins. He did not know what was wrong with the owner of the castle. If it was gold coins, it might not even be enough to fill half of the box. Instead, he used silver coins to fill 4 boxes. If it was gold coins, each knight could easily take away a few. But now it was silver coins. Everyone had to fill their pockets before they could take it away. There were 4 boxes left on the wall. They were no longer filled with silver coins, gold coins, or copper coins. Instead, they were filled with armor. Leader, this set of armor is very light. It should not be an ordinary fine steel armor. The Earth Knight handed the armor to List. List felt it. The armor was indeed very light and thin, but its hardness was no less than the fine steel armor he was wearing. This made his eyes flicker. It's a mithril armor. Congratulations, Leader. The Earth Knight immediately flattered him. There was no doubt that they would get gold and silver coins. List should get better loot. This set of mithril armor was not bad. Among the 4 boxes there were 3 sets of mithril armor. List was very satisfied. This set of mithril armor was worth at least 7 or 8 sets of fine steel armor. He accepted it with a smile. The last box. There was only 1 bow. It had an emerald green bow arm and a silver white bowstring. The shape was obviously the most popular straight bow in the Grand Duchy of Sapphire. It was similar to the English longbow. It was about 1 meter long. The bow arm was not very curved, and it did not have the curved end of a recurved bow. Strictly speaking, this kind of straight bow was not very popular with List. He knew that the development of bows would eventually compromise with recurved bows or compound bows. But the straight bow was relatively simple to make, and it was not easy to change the internal stress. It was easy to maintain and tame. He grabbed the longbow and pulled the bowstring. It was very hard. Without battle energy, List could hardly pull it. He quickly operated the battle energy in his body, pulled the longbow and let go. Buzz. When the bowstring and the bow arm were restored, the feeling of power could be felt through the vibration of the air. A very strong bow. After trying it, he only felt that his original hardwood bow should be thrown away. This emerald green longbow was worthy of his superb archery skills. Moreover, he had already guessed that this longbow was the smoke mission reward of the Wisp soldier. Holding the bow, he said, "This bow and the 3 sets of mithril armor belong to me. You can divide the silver coins." "Yes, my lord." Returning to the study, he carefully looked at the emerald green longbow in his hand. He found that there were small serpentines engraved on the bow arm. He looked at it against the light coming from the window. The serpentines impressively read, Wisp, Swift Shadow Bow. This was the common naming method for Wisp soldiers. Wisp meant that it was soaked in the blood of Wisp soldiers, while Swift Shadow Bow was its real name. He took out an arrow. Circulating his battle energy, he pulled the Swift Shadow Bow. List did not use multiple arrows. He only relied on the power of the bow and arrow to release the bowstring. Whoosh! The sound of breaking air rang out. The arrow was like a ray of light. In a flash, it landed on a tree not far from the castle. The arrow shaft was buried in the trunk. Chapter 376. List decided to replace the Swift Shadow Bow with his own hardwood riding bow. However, he still had to carry the riding bow for the time being. After all, he needed time to familiarize himself with the Swift Shadow Bow. The change in the nature of this little elf could be summed up in one word: fast. The arrow speed was fast. Therefore, he had to practice many times before he could master the double arrow through the Swift Shadow Bow. He started to try on the 3 sets of mithril armor. He picked out a set of more fitting mithril armor and replaced it with his fine steel armor. As for the other 2 sets, he gave the slightly larger one to Marcus. As his night class teacher, List was naturally biased towards him. After receiving the mithril armor, Marcus was extremely excited. He fiercely praised List a few times, and then said something about pledging his loyalty to List. The other night members were full of envy and jealousy towards Marcus, but they didn't make any sarcastic remarks. This was because, according to the system of the continent's countries, Marcus was basically equivalent to List's chief knight. It was a matter of course that the chief knight would receive a better reward. As for the smaller set, List directly rewarded it to Paris. Wear this set of mithril armor and you'll be able to block most attacks. Your safety will also be further guaranteed. Moreover, the mithril armor is very light and won't affect your movements too much. Thank you, Sir Baron. Paris received the armor with a smile. She quickly returned to her room and put on the mithril armor. The armor covered her figure, but it added a bit of valiance. How do you feel? List asked. It fits. It's just that the chest area is a bit tight. It's not very comfortable to breathe. Paris frowned as she adjusted the armor on her chest. List naturally understood the reason. This is a male armor. Put it on for now. After returning to the flower town, have the tailor and blacksmith modify the armor and loosen the sutures on the chest area. It should no longer restrict you. Big breasts were also a troublesome thing. Paris seemed to notice that the topic was a little unnatural, so she changed the subject. I still don't like wearing armor. Leather suits my fighting style better. List said calmly, then when we get back, give me the mithril armor. I'll use it to arm my night squad. I'll have someone make you a set of leather armor with the skin of the 6-headed sea serpent king. Lord Baron, isn't this too expensive? Paris asked. Equipment is for people to use. If they can protect you, it means that their existence is valuable. List revealed a gentle smile. Don't forget, you're the bodyguard I hired. If I encounter any danger, I'll need your help. Paris's eyes lit up. I won't let Lord Baron be in danger. I believe you. They looked at each other. List's expression was still calm, but Paris blushed. She coughed and said, Then I'll go back to my room to rest. Perhaps she didn't notice it herself, but her voice was much softer than usual. List watched Paris leave. List spat out a mouthful of turbid air. He looked at the 4 walls of the study and couldn't help but complain, There are no books in the study, what a barbarian. Black orders of chivalry rested in the nameless castle. He ate and drank to his heart's content, wasting a lot of food. If it weren't for the untimely action, List would have opened the warehouse and distributed the food from the castle to the poor serfs of Main City. Deep down, he still had compassion for the state of the universe. Unfortunately, the spoils of war that couldn't be privately divided in the castle had to be sealed up and handed over to the Grand Duke. In any case, he had to obey on the surface. He took a nap at noon. He began his daily routine of taking potions, and at the same time he sped up the progress of practicing aura decay. He had already tasted the benefits of this chi secret skill. The chi dissipation rate in his body slowed down, and the effects of taking potions began to improve, making him intoxicated and unable to extricate himself. In the evening, when he was preparing to familiarize himself with the Swift Shadow Bow, the retainer knight Philip brought good news. My lord, the barley worm has been bred. Without any hesitation, he immediately led the Flower Town's night squad and rushed towards the barley field with Dosen. When he arrived at the barley field, he saw a chaotic scene. The few retainer knight List had arranged to be stationed here were fighting a monster resembling an ostrich and a rooster. After seeing List and his party, the bird monster didn't dare to continue fighting and immediately turned tail and fled. However, it seemed to be attracted by something. It just ran to the nearby shrubs and continued to stare at the barley field. List rushed to the vicinity of the worm stalk. He didn't contract the barley worm immediately, but rather stared at the strange bird walking at the edge of the shrubs. A thought flashed in his mind. Is this the low-level dragon beast chocobo that I got as a reward for the smoke mission? Its appearance didn't exceed List's imagination. It was not smaller than an ostrich, had a body as fat as a rooster, and had colorful feathers. It looked quite gorgeous. It had a slender neck, a dinosaur-like head, and a large triangular beak with serrated edges. It seemed to be full of teeth. Its legs were thick and sturdy, covered in thick feathers. Moreover, they were very long, at least 1 meter in length. The chocobo was about 2.5 meters tall. Its body was only half a meter long, its legs were 1 meter long, and its neck and head were 1 meter long. This made it look somewhat strange. Now, how do I catch it? The thought flashed through his mind. He asked the retainer knight, "What happened just now, and what's with this bird?" "My lord, we were guarding the barley worm. After the barley worm was bred, for some reason this bird rushed over and wanted to eat the barley worm. Its beak is very sharp and its movements are very fast. We were almost not its match." Xavier replied somewhat embarrassedly. It was indeed a bit shameful for several people to be unable to defeat a bird. Because the chocobo hadn't released any magic, they didn't treat it as a World of Warcraft. Otherwise they would have already disappeared. A trainee knight couldn't deal with a World of Warcraft. But after hearing Xavier's reply, List was still confused. You can defeat it? The chocobo was a low-level dragon. Based on its strength, even if it couldn't defeat an intermediate World of Warcraft, it wouldn't be too far off. Xavier scratched his head. "My lord, this bird is very powerful. It looks like a giant rooster, but apart from using its beak to peck at people, it doesn't have any attack power." A low-level dragon that only knew how to peck at people. He couldn't understand. List saw that the chocobo didn't run away, so he calmed down Dosen, who was about to catch the bird, and formed a contract with the barley worm. Jade powder and a jade box were necessary items for him to go out. He sprinkled some jade powder and stretched out his finger. Soon the barley worm bit down on his finger. The contract was successful. "Little guy, come, I'll take your worm stalk." The barley worm obediently opened its mouth, and the worm stalk immediately shrunk to the size of a grain. It flew out of the soil and into the worm's mouth, disappearing without a trace. Putting the tired barley worm into a jade box, he gave it to the retainer knight. Then List turned his attention to the still wandering chocobo. Chapter 377. Since it was a young bird, things would be much easier. With Dosen's magic rock wall, it could completely block the way and then catch a turtle in a jar. But List didn't choose to do so. Looking at the reluctant chocobo, he suddenly felt that the bird must have a request. It appeared because of the barley sprite worm, which means it feeds on sprite worms? That's a bit hard to accept. Although sprite worms aren't as valuable as low-ranked dragons, they're still terrifying to raise. Feeding on sprite worms might even seem extravagant to a dragon, let alone feeding a low-ranked dragon. Moreover, given the rarity of sprite worms, it was truly inconceivable that a chocobo could survive and grow so big. He deduced that the chocobo was only interested in sprite worms. Maybe I can lure it with something else? While thinking, he had someone bring some jerky and tossed it over. Startled by the jerky, the chocobo hid in the bushes, but soon came out again, cautiously approached the jerky, lowered its head and pecked at it, but didn't eat it. It doesn't eat meat? List had someone throw bread and fruit and found that the chocobo did eat a bit, but didn't show much interest, still staring at the sprite worm in the retainer knight's hand. "Sir, this strange bird probably wants to eat the barley sprite worm," Marcus said directly. "Just shoot it down, leaving it alive would be a waste to the sprite worm." "Don't worry, I'll try again." List rejected. He didn't believe that the chocobo rewarded by the smoke mission was to eliminate the abundant sprite worms in his territory. After thinking about it, he decided to try the effect of the jade. Maybe this low-ranked dragon also liked to eat jade. He threw the jade next to the chocobo's feet. The chocobo lowered its head and pecked at it, indifferent. Jerky didn't work, bread and fruit didn't work, jade didn't work either. List immediately frowned. Does this bird really want to lust after the sprite worm? "Sir, shoot it," Marcus suggested again. Trembling Woods also barked. It was also a little impatient. However, List still chose to try seducing him. After all, this was his reward, so he had to treat it gently. But half an hour later, the chocobo had been showered with all sorts of items, and still none of them had managed to lure it. At this time he could no longer be gentle. With a cold face he gave the order, "Dosen the rock wall." Boom. Dosen lunged forward, opening his mouth to spit out magic, and a 10-meter wall of rock appeared behind the chocobo. Clatter. The chocobo squawked and ran, its movements light and agile, circling the rock wall from the left. But before it could escape, Dosen cast another stone wall. This middle-level World of Warcraft had greatly improved its intelligence under List's training, and it knew how to use magic to hunt. However, everyone had underestimated the speed and agility of the chocobos. This low-level dragon that looked like a long-necked rooster was able to leap high into the air like a flea. As long as the path was blocked by a rock wall, it would leap high into the air and leap over it. No matter how hard they tried, they couldn't even catch a single feather. The night squad had already circled around the bushes, trying to surround the chocobo, but they couldn't. Even when List gave the order to shoot with arrows, they still couldn't hit it. Even after sweating profusely, the chocobo was still jumping around unscathed. "Sir, something's wrong with this bird, it's not a normal beast," Marcus said with a dark expression after a few missed shots. List waved his hand, no longer wasting his energy. The plan to surround the chocobo had failed. "It really is something else. If we can't stop it, we should all stop." Fortunately, the chocobo seemed to be toying with them. It could have run away, but it chose not to, instead playing hide-and-seek with them. One could only imagine how strongly it was attracted to the barley worm, otherwise it wouldn't have taken the risk to stay here. The night squad stopped, and Dosen also lay on the ground with its tongue hanging out. It was the most ferocious in its pursuit, but it still couldn't catch up to the chocobo no matter how hard it tried. All it could do was stick out its tongue awkwardly, pretending that the heat was affecting its performance. As they stopped, the chocobo also stopped, jumping onto a rock wall and staring at List's squad as well as the jade box with the barley worm in it. The best thing to do now was to use the barley worm as bait to lure the chocobo into the trap. But List couldn't bear to do that. With the chocobo's speed and agility, it would be very awkward if it ate the bait and still couldn't stay. Besides, he couldn't tell if it was worth it to lose a barley worm for a chocobo of unknown nature and uses. Suddenly he had a flash of inspiration. He thought of a new plan. He had Marcus find some rope, make a few hunter's ropes and pretend to throw them on the ground. He then picked up the jade box, opened the lid, and waved it around to attract the chocobo's attention. The yellow barley worm immediately attracted the chocobo's attention. Cluck, cluck. List quickly closed the lid. He turned around, put the barley worm into another jade box and secretly passed it to Marcus. Then he turned around again holding the empty jade box, and placed it in the center of the rope trap. Then he slowly retreated until he was about 10 meters away, and waited quietly with Marcus and the others, each holding a rope. Cluck. The chocobo clearly didn't understand what the ropes on the ground were. Its intelligence hadn't evolved to this level yet. So after pacing back and forth impatiently, it finally couldn't hold back its desire for the barley worm, and tentatively walked towards the jade box, only to shrink back again halfway. After walking back and forth a few times, it finally couldn't hold back anymore and rushed towards the jade box. When it stepped into the trap, List suddenly yelled, "Pull!" The other Earth Knights all pulled on the ropes in their hands, but most of them missed except for the one in Griffin's hand, which successfully hooked onto the chocobo's claws and instantly pulled taut. This sudden turn of events shocked the chocobo, and it hurriedly turned around to run, but the rope tugged on it, and it fell to the ground with a thud. At that moment, Dosen was like a black brick, pouncing on the chocobo just as it was about to get up, pinning it to the ground. "Dosen, no biting," List hurriedly ordered. He didn't want his hard-earned reward to be bitten to death by Dosen. Dosen had already obeyed the order instinctively, and didn't bite down, only holding the struggling chocobo down, its huge body pinning the chocobo down. Then the riders of the night squad rushed over, grabbing ropes for the chocobo's heads, legs and wings and tying them up. They had successfully captured a low-level dragon. So fat. Charles Pitfall rubbed the chocobo's belly as he tied it up, exclaiming, "Sir, this bird is enough for us to eat for a few days." List rubbed the chocobo's dinosaur-like head, satisfied with this hunt. "There's no way I'm going to eat it, I'm going to tame it and make it my mount." Chapter 378. By the time the chocobo was captured, the sky was almost dark. After sending away the members of the Orders of Chivalry who came to watch the fun, List began to think about how to tame the chocobo. This wasn't a horse that could be successfully ridden by defeating it. This was a low-level draconic beast, probably not yet an adult, but it was already full of magic. Magic Eye's field of vision was a cyan magical glow, indicating that it was a low-level wind-type draconic beast. The wind-type World of Warcraft generally ran very fast, as evidenced by the Chocobo's performance. It still can't release magic, otherwise it would be even harder to capture. But how do I tame it, without the feelings and conditioned reflexes that I've cultivated since childhood? I can't tame it like I tamed Stupid Woman in a short period of time. Especially looking at it now, it's very hostile towards me, making it even harder to tame. List stood in the cage looking at the Chocobo in the corner and pondering. The Chocobo had been untied, but it was kept in a cage in the castle storehouse. When List first came in, the Chocobo tried to attack List, but was hammered a few times by List's aura-infused fists, and it shrank into a corner, not daring to look directly at List. This allowed List to study it in peace. Casting Magic Eye, he observed the magical state of the Chocobo back and forth, looking for any differences from ordinary World of Warcraft. I'm sure that this strange bird is the low-level draconic beast Chocobo rewarded by the Smoke mission. Currently in its infancy, the magical power in its body seems to be a bit stagnant, not coherent enough. When it came to World of Warcraft, List dared to call himself Coral Island's #1 expert. After all, he studied blizzard beasts all day long. List had a full set of notes on Dosun's changes, and now he still had 8 small notes, so he was very clear about the changes in magical power in World of Warcraft. There was also the magic of elves. He also had a lot of observations and records, even of sirens. So, he quickly discovered that the magic of the Chocobos was different from that of magical beasts. Its mana seems to be somewhere between World of Warcraft and elves. From the way it's dissipating, its mana dissipates much slower than World of Warcraft's mana. Perhaps this situation can be determined by the degree of solidification of the magic power itself? List secretly guessed. He had summarized the magic of different species. The magic of a dragon is undoubtedly the most magical. It can be engraved for a long time without dissipating. The fire dragon on Black Horse Island has been dead for many years, but its magic can still be turned into a magic dragon. The degree of solidification was very high, almost permanently indestructible. The magic power of the elves was undoubtedly second only to that of the dragons. Through the magic released by the worm stalk, it constantly affected the surrounding plants. Although it couldn't be engraved for a long time, it could slowly infiltrate the surrounding environment. The direction of solidification was different from that of a dragon's magic, but the effect was similar. World of Warcraft's magic was undoubtedly a bit weak. It could only trigger fixed spells. However, in comparison, the do-chi of the humans was the most pitiful. This was because they were losing a large amount of do-chi at every moment. It was simply an existence that could not be stopped. Even so, the use of do-chi by humans could not be said to be bad. This was because there were unlimited possibilities to use different do-chi techniques. Dragons were like beings whose magic was solidified to the extreme. They could even represent a certain rule. Humans were born without magic and couldn't store it for long, but there were endless ways to cultivate and refine their own magic. Combat energy is a type of magic. It was like two extremes. List even had a bold guess. Infinitely changing combat energy combined with the most magical magic, could there be a very wonderful chemical reaction? Maybe this is why the Dragon Knight is invincible in this world? There wasn't much theoretical evidence to support his guess. The Dragon Knight was an existence that couldn't be explained at the moment. He put away his thoughts and looked at the magic of the Chocobo. It seems that the magic has reached a critical point. This reminds me of Dosun's evolution, stimulated by the bloodline fruit. Maybe this Chocobo is also on the verge of transformation? Is it hoping to use the magic of the sprite worm as a breakthrough? The more he thought about it, the more likely it seemed. Otherwise, it wouldn't explain why the Chocobo was still looking at the sprite worm even though it was surrounded by people. Unfortunately, I won't take out the sprite worm to feed to the Chocobo. Each sprite worm not only represented value, but also beauty. He thought of Ella, wondering if the thorn sprite would rebel in the castle if it lost its restraints. If I can't use the sprite worm, how can I stimulate the Chocobo's transformation? List touched the space gem and took out a bottle of thorn potion. Can this potion have the same effect? External magic stimulation should be able to replace the sprite's magic. It's worth a try. In fact, there was no need to guess. As soon as he took out the thorn potion, the Chocobo reacted, straightening its body and staring at the crystal tube in List's hand. Cluck. You want it? Cluck. Let me ride you and I'll give it to you. Cluck. The Chocobo dodged List's approach, but its eyes were still fixed on the thorn potion. List thought for a moment, then took out a small jade box, poured out a bit of the thorn potion and handed it to the chocobo. The chocobo looked at List's outstretched hand and quickly pecked at it, taking the jade box with its mouth, then tilted its head back and drank the potion that was not even the size of a fingernail. After he finished drinking, he stuck out his tongue and licked the jade box until the jade box was about to break. Only then did he reluctantly throw the jade box away and shout at List, "Clatter! You still want it? If you want it, let me ride you." After a few more attempts, the chocobo finally fell for the temptation, and List leapt up and rode on its back. Its wide, plump body was perfect for riding, its thick feathers were also soft, especially around its neck and back. It was like a natural saddle. The chocobo on List's back was about to explode. But in the next moment, it quickly steadied itself and let him ride. Because List had already brought the remaining half of the thorn potion to its mouth. The temptation of the thorn potion was irresistible, and it picked up the crystal tube with its mouth, tilted its head back and drank the potion, then licked the tube clean and cried out in pleasure, "Cluck!" It temporarily forgot that there was someone riding on its back. "Very good, that's it, let me ride you and you'll get the potion, got it?" List smiled proudly. Taming a low-level dragon was just that easy. Unlike pure beasts or World of Warcraft, chocobos were highly intelligent, and this made them easy to tempt. Riding represented the potion. If you want the potion, you have to be ridden. The simple logic was quickly imprinted in its intelligent brain. After riding the chocobo around the cage a few times and seeing that it had gotten used to being ridden, List shouted outside, "Thomas, open the cage door." "Open the door." The chocobo shot out like an arrow, swinging List off its back, showing signs of its wild side. List hurriedly pulled out a new thorn potion, instantly stabilizing the chocobo, then used the potion to guide the chocobo back towards the cage. Finally, after losing another thorn potion, the chocobo obediently entered the cage. Tame. Chapter 379. After capturing the chocobo, List was ready to give it a name. Should I name it after its species, or Saber after the hair on its head? He rubbed his chin in thought. Or should I name it Kendrick after its cluck? Or Kata Duck? If I name it after Dosen and Blessed Curls, I should call it Saucy. But List didn't like the name Saucy. Looking at its weak appearance, I might as well call it Weak Chicken. No, Weak Chicken would make my mount ugly. Let's call it Loki. Loki as the name of the chocobo had been decided. In fact, he had thought of using Rainbow as the name of the chocobo, because the feathers of the chocobo were bright and colorful. But Rainbow couldn't reflect the characteristics of the chocobo. This low-level dragon beast could run and jump, and apart from not being able to fly, it was a perfect mount. Of course, a name was just a code name, not demanding. Moonlight shone through the window. List felt that no matter how many achievements he made in this war, he had at least earned back his costs. A chocobo, a barley worm, a lesser elf soldier. And 3 sets of mithril armor. Next, assist the Count in killing Snade. There will be even better rewards. I wonder if it's a high-level Chi secret manual suitable for me. He called out the smoke mission. After searching the castle's underground vault, the previous mission was completed. Mission completed. Reward, a lesser elf swift shadow bow. The new mission was a bit more difficult. Mission: main city has been captured, the obstacles around Oxhair City have been removed, the climax of the campaign is imminent. Please hurry to Oxhair City to assist Lee William Tulip in besieging and killing Count Snade of Oxhair City. Reward, high-level Chi secret manual. High-level Chi secret manual referred to the cultivation secret manual for the Sky Knight, because the Sky Knight's Chi was high-level. At present, there was only one high-grade Chi secret manual on Coral Island, which was the giant wave breaks the tide, cultivated by the Count. This Chi secret manual was of the water attribute, which was not suitable for List. I hope I can be rewarded with a high-grade fire attribute Do Chi manual. After practicing aura decay for 2 hours, he took out a cup of fresh dragon milk from the gem space and drank it, then he began to sleep. The next day he woke up at dawn. After washing up, the army set off. This time he didn't ride Black Dragon but a chocobo. Along the way he continued to tame chocobos and familiarize himself with them. Loki left. With the thorn potion as a guide, List quickly established a simple set of commands. Loki's IQ was very high, and his cooperation was very smooth. The only problem was that he had to spend a lot of money. He had used up 2 thorns potions in the morning, plus the 2 potions he had used last night. It had been less than a day since he had tamed it, and he had used up 4 potions, which was equivalent to throwing away more than a dozen gold coins. It wasn't enough to just train the password. He also needed to train the body's commands to complete its control. I hope that Loki will soon break through the shackles of magic power and enter a new level, no longer needing the help of magic potions. Otherwise, even a count wouldn't be able to support this kind of magic potion. He cast magic eyes and looked at Loki's increasingly abundant magic power. He felt that in a few days it would be able to break through. Maybe at that time, Loki would be able to spit out magic. As for how many kinds of magic low-level dragons could use, he wasn't too clear. There was even less information about dragons than about dragons. Loki run. Loki jump. Loki stop. The password training was very successful. In order to get the Thorns potion, Loki performed very hard. Its abilities were also revealed to List little by little. Its running speed was far faster than that of Black Dragon. An ordinary warhorse's sprinting speed was about 60 km per hour, Black Dragon could sprint up to 100 km per hour, and the Chocobo's sprinting speed was almost twice that of Black Dragon, 200 km per hour. But Black Dragon could run at high speed for nearly an hour or two, while the Chocobo couldn't even last 10 minutes. Its normal running speed was maintained at 60 km per hour. When running and jumping, it could reach a vertical height of 4.5 meters and a horizontal length of 41 meters. When jumping in place, it could reach a vertical height of 3 meters and a horizontal length of 14 meters. At this level, it could be called a jumping machine. It had the elegance of a Sky Knight. A Sky Knight could fly for a short period of time. And these data were all from when the Chocobo was still a juvenile. Once the Chocobo reached adulthood, these data would definitely improve. Most importantly, it would be able to learn magic very quickly. He didn't know what kind of wind magic a low-level dragon of the wind attribute could use, but he hoped it wouldn't be wind blades like the Windblade Wolf. "Sir, there's a small town up ahead. According to the map it should be West Wind Town. Should we rest here for a while? It's already noon." Captain Layden ran over to ask. "Then let's rest. What is this World of Warcraft? It's very powerful as a mount." Paris approached List, who was feeding the Chocobo. The Chocobo was probably full from drinking the potion, and was now crazily eating fruit and bread to replenish its energy. It is a vegetarian animal, but its favorite is cooked bread. After being ridden by List for a whole morning, it no longer tried to avoid List's touch, and was leisurely eating its bread. Strictly speaking, its head didn't look like a bird's. It looked more like the small dinosaur heads that List had seen on Discovery, and the feathered ancient dinosaurs that looked like birds. But the Chocobo's neck and legs were very long, and its tail was as short as a chicken's. "A type of flightless bird in World of Warcraft, I call it Loki," List said. He didn't reveal that the Chocobo was a dragon. Even a dragon was a rare species, let alone a dragon in World of Warcraft. If the Chocobo's dragon bloodline was revealed, there would definitely be a fight for it. "Dosen and Loki, Lord Baron, you already have 2 World of Warcraft mounts, one of which is an intermediate level World of Warcraft. There will be more World of Warcraft mounts in the future. In fact, my biggest dream is to ride a dragon. Everyone in the world wants to ride a dragon, but I don't think anyone in the Grand Duchy of Sapphire has ever successfully ridden a dragon. To be precise, in the 152 years since the founding of the kingdom, only the first Grand Duke has ever ridden a dragon." List smiled, looking very confident. "I hope I'll be the second person to ride a dragon." Paris said, "Glory to the Knight, Baron, may the Baron realize his dream as soon as possible." After resting for the afternoon in West Wind Town, they continued on their way. List also continued to train the Chocobo. Having eaten its fill, the Chocobo became a bit lazy, ignoring his orders. But when he took out another thorn potion, the Chocobo quickly went back to work, going wherever he pointed. Just like that, they galloped all the way to Oxhair City by nightfall, and found the Red Orders of Chivalry's camp. Chapter 380. So, after a charge, you defeated the Orders of Chivalry and wiped out all the Earth Knight, and then the knight inside the castle surrendered and easily took over the castle? The Earl was a little surprised by List's speed. In just 2 days, List had completed the cleanup of the main city and captured a city. But there was still no news from Jonas, who went to Little River City, and Trick, who went to Tree Shade City. "I have Dosen. Father, you should know the power of the intermediate World of Warcraft. The rock thorns completely disrupted the enemy's charging formation, and then they were destroyed by my Black Orders of Chivalry." Because it was a private conversation, he didn't use the title Lord Earl. Dosen grows very fast. It's only a little over a year old, but it can already show its ferocity on the battlefield. With Dosen, this battle will be easy. Currently, Snader is hiding in the Vanilla Celery Castle. No matter how I provoke him, he won't come out. It's a good chance for Dosen to destroy the castle. It's easy to destroy a nameless castle. It might be a little difficult to destroy the vanilla celery castle, but it's still possible to destroy the castle structure. Destroying the structure is enough. Snyder will never sit back and watch his castle be destroyed. When he attacks, I'll cut off his head. As a Sword Saint level Sky Knight, Lee William was very confident in dealing with an ordinary level Sky Knight. List smiled. I'm looking forward to it. The Earl of Coral Island was a little emotional. Unknowingly, the three of us have been fighting side by side on the battlefield. In a few years, Lytton should also go to the battlefield. You performed very well this time. I will remember your contribution. Accumulate a few more battle achievements, and it will be enough for you to be conferred the title of Viscount. Capturing a small city was obviously not enough to be conferred the title of Viscount. However, there was still Oxhair City that he could capture and gain some military merits. If he could capture other cities and gain some military merits, he might even be able to become a Viscount in one go, and he wouldn't have to wait for the next expansion battle. He suddenly thought of a question. Father, I asked the knight to send you a message. Did you find out what was the important matter that Sneyd and the magician were discussing? The elder brother of the free rat heard the secret conversation between Sneyd and the magician and waited for something big to happen. This made List very concerned. The Earl frowned. I've sent someone to contact Marquis Grindenton, and he wrote back to me that he will keep in touch with the first and second princes to ensure that nothing unexpected happens. As for what it is, it's not clear yet. If it's true, it should be related to the goat gathering. In fact, there was another possibility related to dragons, but the father and son did not mention it. Has Marquis Bull's angry orders of chivalry taken Oxtail City? Of course not. Marquis Wallace has rushed there, and the first prince has also sent your uncle there. With the orders of chivalry from the Pineapple family and the orders of chivalry from the Taro family, it's not difficult to resist Duke Wallace's angry orders of chivalry. But I heard that a great magician has joined the battle and the situation is in a stalemate. Can a great magician influence the battle of the Knight's Charge? List asked. He was not very clear about the concept of a great magician. He only knew that a great magician was very strong in magic, and even dared to plot against dragons. The great magician of the Grand Duchy of Maple Leaf plotted against the Light Dragon and created Paris and other black dragons. The great magician of the Grand Duchy of Sapphire plotted against the Sapphire Dragon, which led to the Marquis's betrayal. No wonder he was called an evil magician. But in common parlance, a magician can't compete with a knight. A knight can easily crush a magician. The Count thought for a moment and slowly said, the reason why the knight is the mainstream does not mean that a knight is necessarily stronger than a magician. It only shows that the cultivation of chi is more common. As long as sufficient nutrition is provided from childhood, even the worst talent can cultivate chi. Magic, on the other hand, requires aptitude. An ordinary person, eating and drinking from childhood, coupled with ordinary chi cultivation methods, will certainly be able to cultivate low-level chi. Constantly accumulating World of Warcraft meat, will certainly be able to cultivate mid-level chi. Constantly infusing magic potions, as long as one is not too stupid, will be able to cultivate high-level chi. In other words, an ordinary Sky Knight can be cultivated in batches as long as there are enough resources. List's uncle Mesiro is an excellent example. Marquis Merlin only had one son, Mesiro, so all the resources of the Taro family were poured into Mesiro, allowing him to successfully cultivate from a good-for-nothing to an ordinary Sky Knight. Going further up, resources can't be accumulated, or in other words, even the strength of a country can't afford the next step of cultivation resources. 99 out of 100 people can cultivate chi by eating meat, and 20 of them may become Earth Knight by eating more meat. But only 10 out of 100 people can be selected as a magic apprentice and sense magic, and one of them may not become a magician. Such a significant ratio gap led to the knight ruling the world, not the magician. The Count changed the subject. Those who can become magicians are often geniuses. Making magic equipment is inseparable from them, making potions is inseparable from them, and as for fighting, in a fair duel I can defeat any great magician, but in fact great magicians will not fight a knight alone. He gave an example. The angry orders of chivalry sneak attack the second prince's orders of chivalry. Obviously, there is the help of the great magician of the Goat congregation, just like you brought Dosen and used magic to destroy the Knight's Charge formation. Since the great magician is so strong, why are there so few magicians following the orders of chivalry? The great magician's magic can only be used for sneak attacks. In the process of casting magic, it needs to condense free magic from the air. But when the knight charges, the chi gathers together and affects all the magic around it. The magician can't condense magic at all, and he can't even release magic. This is the advantage of Dosen, it can draw magic from its own body to release magic. When the magician is on the battlefield, as long as the knight charges, it will be declared invalid. But on the other hand, as long as the magician finds a chance to release magic, the knight will also suffer heavy casualties. The elite blue blood orders of chivalry led by the second prince should have been attacked by the magician. So, the count emphasized, don't underestimate the magicians. They can always cause trouble. I see. Liszt nodded. Father, is there a great magician hiding in Caraway Castle? Snyder insisted on defending. I think he must have something to rely on. It's possible, but it doesn't matter. As long as the great magician dares to show up, my long sword will make him regret participating in the Knight's War. The atmosphere between the father and son was good. After talking about the war, the Count also gave some advice to Liszt on his experience in cultivation. Now the Count treated Liszt less and less as a child, but as an adult who could discuss things with him. Liszt felt that the atmosphere was good, and it didn't make him feel uncomfortable. In any case, he had a knot in his heart because he was not the real Count's son. However, the harmonious atmosphere didn't last long. The night came with bad news. Chapter 381. The news that Jonas sent back interrupted the Count's idea of besieging castle. Besieging the castle required several times the number of knights than the defenders, combined with sufficient combat power to buff the knights' combat power and destroy the castle. Especially the large castle with a name, its defense was strong and more difficult to attack. His original intention was to cooperate with Dosen's dismantling ability by concentrating 5 orders of chivalry to attack Castle Fragrant, suppressing the guard knight in the castle, so that Dosen could release magic to his heart's content. Now, the situation was a little grim. Jonas's Grey Orders of Chivalry suffered heavy casualties and was no longer able to attack the castle of Little River City. On the other side, the Cyan Orders of Chivalry led by Viscount Trick was also in trouble. The castle of Tree Shade City was tall and strong and couldn't be attacked. The Yellow Orders of Chivalry led by Levis was helping Viscount Trick to attack together. The Count must contain the Orders of Chivalry of Castle Fragrant. Therefore the task of support could only be placed on Liszt. Without any hesitation, the Count directly called out, "Take Dosen and go to Little River City to support the Grey Orders of Chivalry. After attacking the castle, go to Tree Shade City to support the Cyan Orders of Chivalry. Liszt, you are my son blessed by the glory of the night. In this battle, earn enough glory." After experiencing the baptism of victory, Liszt was no longer afraid, only excited. He longed for war merits, and a main city was obviously not enough. Now with the addition of Little River City and Tree Shade City, and finally a share of Oxhair City's war merits, it would be almost enough. "Yes, father, I will definitely gain more glory." Set off. As the sun rose in the east, they rushed to Little River City. Along the way, Liszt was still busy taming the chocobo. This low-level dragon was observed by the Count, but the Count didn't know what breed it was or what level it was. He only treated it as a low-level World of Warcraft monster that couldn't cast magic and said, "The glory of the night truly favors you." A sword saint couldn't even find a World of Warcraft mount, yet his son was riding one and leading the other. His heart was indeed sour. They sped along the way. At noon, he arrived at Little River City and met up with the Grey Orders of Chivalry, who was resting. Viscount Jonas' left wrist was wrapped in cloth and welcomed Liszt. "Baron Liszt, thank you for your generous support. How is the battle in Main City?" "I've already annihilated the Orders of Chivalry from Main City. I'm currently meeting up with the Count in Oxhair City. Upon receiving your request for reinforcements, the Count sent me here to provide support." "You've already destroyed Main City?" Yunus was very surprised. Liszt smiled faintly. "Of course it's very easy." "Easy?" Yunus really wanted to tell him not to brag in front of him, but when he thought of Dosen he couldn't say anything. He could only change the topic. "Then Baron Liszt, what are you going to do now? My Grey Orders of Chivalry have lost more than half of their knight. It's very difficult to organize an effective assault." "How's the damage to the castle in Little River City?" "There were originally around 150 knight, but we've heavily injured around 50 of them. The remaining 100 knight are hiding in the castle and won't come out." "Then we'll tear down their castle." Dosen had only displayed his abilities during the assault. He had yet to test his ability to tear down a castle. However, with the previous battle, Liszt was very confident. Viscount Jonas, organize the Grey Orders of Chivalry and my Black Orders of Chivalry to combine and suppress the castle. Let me command Dosen to tear down the castle. Can Dosen do it? No problem. Good. Jonas was also a straightforward person. His Grey Orders of Chivalry had suffered disastrous casualties. This battle could be said to be a loss. Now, he only hoped to quickly reverse the situation and strive for some military achievements to make up for the losses in the following battles. After the reorganization. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, when the sun shone on the front of the castle, Liszt had already changed to Black Dragon and led the Black Orders of Chivalry and Viscount Jonas to rush to the castle. Earth Knights practiced archery, but not many people practiced archery similar to multiple arrows. Therefore, when the Orders of Chivalry shot around the castle, the scale was very shocking. The arrows infused with chi were like small bombs that could always consume the rocks of the castle walls. And the sharpshooters who were proficient in archery were constantly roaming around and shooting at the archers in the castle, suppressing and counterattacking. Liszt himself was a sharpshooter. However, he didn't shoot. Instead, he raised his shield and directed Dosen to approach the castle. Dosen, rock grenades. Boom. Dosen opened his mouth and spat out a spell. A huge rock condensed in the air and fiercely smashed towards the castle. Clang. The walls on the second floor of the castle cracked like the screen of a broken mobile phone. However, the walls watered with glutinous rice juice were still firm and couldn't be destroyed by a rock grenade. Liszt also didn't expect to succeed in one shot. He constantly directed Dosen to release rock grenades and smash them into the same section of the castle wall. Occasionally he would release rock thorns to damage the corners of the castle walls. The rock thorns had to be pierced out of the soil, so the damage to the corners was limited. However, the castle quickly shook due to the constant consumption. Coupled with the rock grenades bombardment, after a dozen or so times, Dosen was so tired that he was gasping for breath. However, this section of the wall of the nameless castle had successfully collapsed. A huge gap was revealed. Upon seeing this, Viscount Jonas suddenly threw the knight spear in his hand and fiercely stabbed at the gap. The formidable strength of the veteran elite Earth Knight was vividly displayed at this moment. The spear directly pierced through the two Earth Knights who were about to plug the gap and nailed them inside the castle. Charge. Break into the gap. Liszt replaced the fine steel shield and threw the knight spear with one hand, stabbing an Earth Knight who stretched his head out. He then pulled out the red blood sword and pointed it at the gap in the castle. The Black Orders of Chivalry and the incomplete Cyan Orders of Chivalry were like sharks smelling blood. They madly sprinted, jumped high from the horse's back and crashed into the huge gap. The knight spear was no longer usable, but the one-handed sword and two-handed sword could be used in the castle. After the charge, it was the siege sword battle. Every knight had to practice two routines, charge and sword battle. Liszt was very proficient in sword battle, because he knew that he would be promoted to a Sky Knight very quickly. Once he was promoted, there was no need to lead the Orders of Chivalry to charge. He could directly fight alone. The second stage of the Sky Knight was called Sword Saint. It was derived from this, known as Sword Saint. At this moment, Liszt rehearsed in advance. He paced outside the castle with Dosen and did not participate in the siege. At this time, fighting and killing in the narrow space of the castle was inevitable to get injured. He did not like it. When his strength was not enough, it was more in line with his style to use the bow and arrow outside. In the last battle I led the charge. Everyone remembered my bravery. At this moment I used the bow and arrow to shoot, which was more like giving the credit of victory to my subordinates. He took out the swift shadow bow. Liszt knocked an arrow and aimed at the gap where the battle was heating up. He suddenly pulled the bowstring, poured his chi into it and released his fingers. Whoosh! A slight sound of breaking through the air sounded. The arrow, with the special property of the swift shadow bow, turned into an invisible light and accurately pierced into the neck of a fierce Earth Knight who was waving his sword. Just now he raised his head and there was a gap between his helmet and armor. Chapter 382. From the moment Dosen tore a hole in the castle, a massacre was destined. Viscount Jonas, who had been holding his breath, took the lead. The two Orders of Chivalry and nearly 200 Earth Knights attacked the castle, killing everyone they saw. In this nameless castle built by the river, a contest of flesh and blood began. Countless fighting skills bloomed in the castle. Liszt, who did not choose to attack, continued to dismantle the castle with Dosen, who had rested. He only stopped when half of the castle wall collapsed. Such a wide open door could no longer stop the impact of the Orders of Chivalry. The battle was about to reach its climax. At this time, List waved his hand and let the remaining Earth Knights follow and squeeze into the castle. He also pulled out the red blood sword and leaped into the castle. The overall situation was settled. It was not bad to come and grab some kills. Or it could not be said to grab kills, but to overwhelm the battle and reduce the losses of the orders of chivalry. Great fire wave! He shouted in his heart. He had already casually used a fighting skill. The flame-wreathed red blood sword easily split the enemy Earth Knight's armor, leaving a deep wound that exposed the bone. After that, he launched an ordinary attack and killed an ordinary Earth Knight who looked immature in the blink of an eye. In fact, among all the knights on the battlefield, his face was also young. He quickly attacked the depths of the castle and saw that Viscount Jonas was fighting with an opponent on the castle's walkway. The two were equally matched. The others could not intervene at all. Looking at this person's attire, List immediately guessed that the other party was the owner of this nameless castle, the Viscount of Little River City. He was also a veteran elite Earth Knight. Perhaps his background was a bit poor. The castle did not even have a name, but his strength was not bad. Viscount Jonas, who was slightly injured, could not take him down. Let's end this quickly. List did not care about one-on-one fair duels. One-on-one duels were not important on the battlefield. He raised the red blood sword and immediately used the ultimate skill of Fire Dragon Drill, Heart of Fire Dragon Drill. He cut into the battle forcefully. Together with Jonas, he attacked the Viscount from the left and right. With List's help, the scales of the battle instantly tilted. A minute later, the Viscount lost his strength and staggered. List and Eunice's eyes lit up at the same time, and their long swords stabbed into the gap of the Viscount's armor almost instantly. Pucci. Pucci. The eruption of battle chi, especially List's fire-attributed battle chi, exploded in the Viscount's body, severely injuring his internal organs. Ah! The Viscount let out a loud roar. Unable to hold on any longer, he knelt on the ground and breathed his last. List couldn't stand it anymore, so he kicked the Jew in front of him to the ground. Then they moved past the corpses to support more local occupation. Eunice was also roaming around to provide support. The elite Earth Knight, who was addicted to drugs, had brilliant sword techniques, and the effect was as if he was harvesting chives. 20 minutes later, the sounds of fighting and killing in the castle weakened. Half an hour later, there were no more battle scenes. The battle of attacking and defending the castle ended just like that. There weren't many waves. Check the casualties. Shaking off the coagulated blood on the red blood sword, he walked out of the castle and breathed in the fresh air outside the castle. There was a strong smell of blood and stench in the castle. A moment later, Captain Leiden walked over. Captain, 140 Black Orders of Chivalry participated in the battle. 9 were sacrificed and 17 were seriously injured. 69 Grey Orders of Chivalry participated in the battle. 11 were sacrificed and 21 were seriously injured. In total, 105 Earth Knight and many Trainee Knight were killed in this battle. The 9 knights sacrificed by the Black Orders of Chivalry included a follower of List, Leslie Withered Leaves, who had followed him for a short time. Among the heavily injured knight, there was also a follower of List, his former classmate Rick Footprint. This 19-year-old son of a small noble had just broken through to Earth Knight and was still very young. As soon as he rushed into the castle, he was seriously injured and lay on the ground moaning for a long time. It wasn't until the battle ended that he was discovered. In fact, it was rare for a knight to be killed in one blow. Most of them were seriously injured and lost the ability to fight. After the battle ended, the wounded were captured as prisoners or rescued by their companions. The proportion of casualties was not very high. However, this time the Grand Duke refused to take prisoners. The knight on the losing side who did not die would be killed, causing all the knight in the nameless castle to die in battle. Phew. In the Battle of Main City there were 0 casualties. In the Battle of Little River City, 9 people died. List knew that sacrifices were inevitable in battle, but he still felt bad when he heard the data. He asked, Captain Leiden, what should we do with the people who died in the battle? Cremate them. May they return to the glory of the night. Then cremate them. Yes, Captain. Treating the wounded, plundering the castle, resting and relaxing. After leaving it to his subordinates, List and Jonas stayed in the room on the highest floor of the castle, drinking freshly brewed coffee and summarizing the battle losses. Jonas didn't look very excited, even a little pale. The battle was more difficult than I thought. I am already used to the war style of the expansion orders and am somewhat unaccustomed to siege battles. As a result, the Grey Orders of Chivalry suffered heavy losses and are now on the verge of collapse. In the previous night charge, the Grey Orders of Chivalry were unprepared and half of the knights were seriously injured. In this siege battle there were more than 30 casualties. Now only 37 knights could still fight. "Viscount Jonas, what is the style of the expansion orders?" asked Liszt. "The expansion orders mainly focus on plundering. We follow the count around the major cities and plunder the resources we want. We rarely engage in siege battles. In order to prevent precious resources from being plundered, the knight in the castle had to go out of the city to fight us, giving us the opportunity to charge. With the sacred swordsman of Waves Lee William overseeing the charge on flat ground, the orders of chivalry of the Coral Island were very powerful. Moreover, Lee William specifically picked soft persimmons to pinch. The territories of the old marquises and counts were hardly touched by Lee William. Every time he fired, he would change places, coming and going like the wind, always reaping results. What's more, there were local mercenary forces taking advantage of the chaos to plunder people and then secretly trade with the Grand Duchy of Sapphire Night and sell serfs. Therefore, in the War of the Expansion Orders, the excess resources plundered were not taken away and were directly disposed of on the spot. The human heart had always been subdued by benefits. In the Expansion Orders, the charge on flat ground was smooth sailing. Due to the relatively little experience in siege sword battles, Jonas used the old way of thinking to lead this battle, resulting in excessive losses. "If you hadn't rushed over with Dosen, I'm afraid I wouldn't have been able to take the castle of Little River City. The glory that I have charged for half a lifetime would have been lost here." Thinking of the terrible ending, Jonas' sturdy body trembled slightly. Perhaps, including the Count, they had more or less miscalculated the difference between this war and the expansion orders. The followers of Marquis Bull did not care about the gains and losses of territory resources. They only cared about whether they could defend the castle and resist the Grand Duke's revenge. Liszt's face was solemn, but his heart was actually quite relaxed. "If the glory is lost, then we will snatch it back. Now that the castle of Little River City has been taken and all the knight have been killed, we will set off for Tree Shade City early tomorrow morning and cooperate with Viscount Trick and Viscount Levis to capture Tree Shade City's Greenleaf Castle." Chapter 383. Greenleaf Castle was far taller and stronger than the nameless castle. However, under the suppression of the Black, Yellow, Cyan and the remaining Grey Orders of Chivalry, Dosen still spent half a day to tear down one of the castle's walls. Next, the 4 Orders of Chivalry's knights swarmed in. Levis, Trick, Eunice, plus Liszt, the 4 elite Earth Knight of the Poison Medicine School, could be described as a super luxurious combination. Pushing forward all the way in less than an hour, the siege of Greenleaf Castle had ended. This time, the 4 Orders of Chivalry's elite knight had gathered together, and the losses were even smaller. The Black Orders of Chivalry only had 5 knights killed and 10 knights seriously injured. After 3 battles, the Black Orders of Chivalry's 142 knights, 14 were killed and 29 were seriously injured. There were only 99 knights left who could still fight. In addition to the military achievements and the previous harvest of Liszt, there were not many other spoils of war that could be privately divided, only some gold coins. Most of the supplies had been moved away, especially the valuables, which were taken away by the knights' relatives to hide in the Iron Hoof City. Marquis Bull had long been prepared to assassinate the Sapphire Dragon and face the Grand Duke's revenge. That night, the 4 Orders of Chivalry, with bulging gold coins in their pockets, met up with the Count. "Thank you for your hard work, everyone." The Count set up a banquet in the camp to welcome the 4 Orders of Chivalry's commanders. However, there was no wine, only a big meal. Eunice looked ashamed. "I'm sorry, my lord, I let you down." "Your performance was really disappointing, Eunice," said the Count. "Count Snader is just an ordinary Sky Knight, and the quality of his followers is far behind yours. Without the support of Liszt, the proportion of your losses would have been far higher than the other side, and it was in the flat ground." Eunice knelt on one knee and said nothing. The Earl waved his hand. "You will have to bear the consequences of this mistake. But now you still have a chance to make up for it. Merge the Grey Orders of Chivalry into the Black Orders of Chivalry. You will be Liszt's assistant." Eunice did not complain. "Yes, sir." Liszt didn't care either. He did not mind Eunice taking a share of the loot, as he was the leader of the Orders of Chivalry. All the credit had to go through him to be distributed to the members of the Orders of Chivalry. In the knight system, the Great Lord was only responsible to the Lesser Lord and his direct knight. All the achievements of the Orders of Chivalry or the knight squad led by the Lesser Suzerain would be credited to the Lesser Suzerain. After the Greater Lord distributed the rewards to the Lesser Lord, the lesser lord would go back and calculate how the reward should be divided among his knights. Now Eunice's reward would also be calculated by list. Sir Earl, with the help of Viscount Eunice, the Black Orders of Chivalry can take on more tasks. He responded loudly with a plan in his mind. The more Black Orders of Chivalry rendered, the more likely he was to be made a Viscount. As long as he was made a Viscount, everything would be fine. He could withdraw funds from Flower Town and distribute them to his knight subordinates as rewards. It did not matter even if he had to bear some debts in the short term. The ownership of the Black Horse Island was the most important result. The Earl understood List's thoughts. He nodded. Dosen will be of great use. The Black Orders of Chivalry will naturally need to recognize more tasks. So, let's plan how to capture Caraway Castle. We will rest for a day and immediately start the siege. Get ahead of everyone and complete the cleanup of Oxhair City. Bow and arrow suppression. Dosen released magic rock grenades and rock thorns. This routine was repeated all day. Lee William rode his horse and patrolled under the castle. As long as Snader dared to show his head, he would not hesitate to rush over, intercept Snader and fight. When Dosen's magic was exhausted, the Orders of Chivalry withdrew. After Dosen recovered, the Orders of Chivalry rushed over again and continued to suppress with arrows. Back and forth, the Knight of Caraway Castle could only watch as Dosen dismantled the castle and bombarded it from the windows and other positions. Every rock grenade could break a crack in the wall. In less than 2 days, a wall could definitely be taken down and the door of Caraway Castle would be opened. So the battle went as expected. The next morning, Earl Snade of Caraway Castle could not bear it. While the Orders of Chivalry of Coral Island retreated to rest, he quickly led the Orders of Chivalry to rush out and launch a charge. Unfortunately, his actions were expected. With binoculars at all times, it was difficult to escape the surveillance of Caraway Castle. The decisive moment has arrived. The Sacred Sword Master of Waves Lee William raised his long sword, 2 gems, 1 yellow and 1 green, glittering brightly. Charge. Orders of Chivalry of Caraway Castle launched a charge. Orders of Chivalry of Coral Island also launched a charge. Caraway Castle had about 300 knight, while Coral Island had about 500 knight. There was a great disparity in strength. Snade was an ordinary Sky Knight, while Lee William was a Sacred Swordsman level Sky Knight. The outcome of this battle had already been written when Dosen joined the battle. The southwest wind blew and billowed, sand and dust filled the sky. 2 torrents of cavalry quickly approached. The tremors of the horses' hooves made it seem as if an earthquake had broken out within a radius of several kilometers. All the beasts and birds were frightened and fled in all directions. Only the uniform charge chant reverberated over the battlefield. Charge! All troops attack! Riding Black Dragon, List charged side by side with Dosen. In the face of such a torrent, he suddenly felt that each individual was really insignificant. The integrated Orders of Chivalry were the real war machines. All kinds of chi filled the air and mixed together, concentrating everyone's essence, energy and spirit. The surging chi mixture involved the chi within each knight's body, increasing their explosive power by at least 20%. Holding the knight's spear in his hand, his body rose and fell along with Black Dragon's charge. Suddenly 3 lines of the Song of Gale appeared in List's mind. The wind rises and the clouds fly, Vega returns to his homeland in the sea. Brave warriors guard the 4 directions. The spears were about to collide. He quickly concentrated his mind and issued an order, Dosen multiple rock thorns. Dosen's magic power had yet to be completely restored, but it didn't take much effort to cast multiple rock thorns a few times. In the blink of an eye, the formation of Black Orders of Chivalry and Orders of Chivalry was disrupted by the rock thorns. The battle aura that was connected together was scattered. The enemy knight lost its strength boost, and its momentum of charge came to a halt. The Black Orders of Chivalry, with List and Yunus as the arrowheads and the ferocious Teuton Dosen as the ferocious behemoth, instantly tore through the opponent's defenses. Like 3 sharp knives stabbing into their chests, they began to disembowel their bellies. Puchi. The knight's spear pierced through an earth knight. In the blink of an eye, the 2 cavalrymen collided. Blood and flesh splattered, chi and horses danced. If a knight's spear was broken, he would immediately replace it with another. If a knight didn't have time to replace his spear, he would raise his shield or draw his sword. In just a few breaths of time, the Black Orders of Chivalry, with the help of Dosen, had already penetrated the opponent's formation. Turning his horse around, the connected chi didn't scatter, and immediately began the second round of charge. At that moment, thunder rumbled in the sky, attracting List's attention. List was momentarily absent-minded. He looked up at the sky and saw a dark green light and a light purple light colliding with a loud bang. Thunder rolled and lightning flashed. Heavy rain poured down. Chapter 384. The thunderstorm did not affect the charge of the knight on the ground. List was bent on seizing credit, so after defeating the opposing orders of chivalry, he immediately rushed to the side of the orders of chivalry, taking advantage of the few rockthorns Dosen could still release, to defeat a group of knight and expand the battle. 500 versus 300, he had the advantage in strength. Coupled with Dosen's charge, the battle was one-sided. It was only a matter of time before the knight of Fragrant Celery Castle was eliminated. Covered in blood, List already didn't know how many Earth Knights he had sent flying with his Knight Spear. Dosen was protecting him by his side, and Paris could use her Light Shadow ability to rush into the battlefield at any time to rescue him. Therefore his battles were all open and unrestrained. This kind of open and unrestrained fighting power matched with his chi attribute. When all the Knight Spears were broken, he looked at the entire battlefield. The Knight of Fragrant Celery Castle was utterly defeated, surrounded and cut by the Coral Island orders of chivalry, charging back and forth. "Jonas!" He gave a loud shout. Jonas, who was fighting frantically, turned his head, his eyes bloodshot, his reason barely remaining. "What's the matter?" "You take command, I'm going to support Sir Count." With that, List urged his horse to gallop away from the main battlefield, followed by Dosen. After transferring command on the way to support the Count, he quickly switched to the swift Shadow Bow. However, he wasn't heading in the direction of the battle between the two Sky Knights, but in the main camp. As he approached the main camp, he galloped while shouting, "Open Loki's cage." The retainer knight guarding the main camp hurriedly opened the cage containing the chocobos. List whistled, and the chocobo Loki hopped over and carried him on its back. "Take care of my horse." After explaining, List gave the order, and the chocobos flew towards where the Sky Knight was fighting. The Sky Knight could teleport for a short period of time, and that was a huge threat to List. But the chocobos, which were also good at jumping, could effectively evade the Sky Knight's attacks. Letting him participate in the battle would guarantee his safety. On the way he blew another whistle. Soon, another whistle sounded not far away. It was Paris' response. After making sure he was safe, the chocobo took him to the battlefield, where Lee William, the Sword Saint of Waves, was suppressing Count Snade. Count Snader was of the thunder attribute. His whole body was flashing with thunder and lightning. However, Llewellyn's water attribute had the beauty of subduing hardness with softness. Surrounded by water vapor, he could always deflect the opponent's thunder strikes. "Count, I'll lend you a hand." When List shouted, he had already drawn his bow and shot an arrow. He had already mastered the basic archery skill, 3 arrows at once. The 3 arrows flew in a triangular formation, and with the help of the swift shadow bow, they attacked Count Snader from 100 meters away. He had practiced multiple arrows. He had mastered double arrow and triple arrow, but had not mastered multiple arrow and ultimate meaning yet. However, being able to use triple arrow at will was enough to announce that he had mastered it. At first, Count Snader did not take List seriously. Riding a strange bird did not change the fact that the Earth Knight was weak. Without flying, it was hard to do any damage to the Sky Knight. But the speed of the 3 arrows still scared him. In the blink of an eye, the arrows were already in front of him, forcing him to pull back his sword to block them. Once he lost his footing, he had to face Llewellyn's endless attacks. It was as if he was facing heavy waves, one after the other. Then, tragically, he found that List had shot 3 sharp arrows at him from another direction, cooperating with Llewellyn's attacks. The arrows were still as fast as lightning. "How dare you, Earth Knight, interfere in the battle? I'll kill you first." Snader was furious. He crazily operated his thunder fighting energy to increase his speed. Then he gave up on Llewellyn and turned to attack List, who was sneak attacking. Llewellyn followed closely and warned, "Be careful." List did not need to be warned. He was already careful enough. Dosen, stop him. Dosen, who was guarding beside him, pounced on Snader. The intermediate world of Warcraft was fierce. He threw a rock grenade at random, forcing Snader to land on the ground to dodge. Thus, Snader's killing plan was stopped. Facing Dosen, who looked like a flying dust dog but had a huge body, Snader did not choose to fight him head-on. Instead, he took a detour and chased after List. However, when he raised his head, he saw that List, who was not far away, had already hopped a few hundred meters away on the strange bird with a long neck and legs. Snader had no chance to chase after Snader at this distance. Llewellyn and Dosen pounced at him at the same time. Snyder, do you think you can kill anyone else in front of me? Llewellyn descended from the sky. The gemstone on his long sword shone brightly, rolling up a huge wave that engulfed Snyder. Ha! Snyder fought back with all his might. His long sword was wrapped in countless lightning bolts, striking the wave crazily. Water splashed and sparks flew in all directions. The ground around him turned into a pool of water. Most of the grass was burnt and emitted yellow smoke. Before Snyder could catch his breath, the ground under his feet suddenly split open and a rock spike went straight for his anus. Snyder was so scared that his hair stood up, raising his armor by 1 centimeter. He hurriedly jumped away and narrowly dodged the rock spike's sneak attack. However, at that moment, the wind whistled in his ears. 3 more sharp arrows flew toward his neck, cheeks, and chest. Snyder had no choice but to quickly bend his waist and pull out his sword to block the 3 arrows. He could not stop the attacks at all. Llewellyn's long sword made it impossible for Snyder to dodge. Sparks burst out of the armor on his chest, and he was sent flying by a powerful force. Snyder spat out a mouthful of blood from the hole in his mask. He was already injured. I'll kill you while you're down. Llewellyn, List, and Dosen joined hands to attack Snyder again. Snyder was no match for Llewellyn. Coupled with the intermediate World of Warcraft's Blizzard Beast and the superb archery of List, there was no way he could compete with Llewellyn. In less than 3 rounds, Snyder was hit twice by Llewellyn's sword. When he fell to the ground, Dosen's rock spike grazed his leg. He even took an arrow from List in the air. Although the arrow did not penetrate the armor made of an unknown material, the warrior energy on the arrow still exploded and made Snyder stagger. Llewellyn, I'll remember you. Snyder roared and madly used his warrior energy again. He turned around and flew into the air trying to escape. However, no one would allow him to escape. Llewellyn's eyes were sharp. His long sword stirred up endless waves and pulled Snyder back to the ground. List also roared, Dosen, bite and entangle. At the same time he pulled out 6 arrows, put 3 in his mouth and put the other 3 on the bowstring. He used the ultimate skill of multiple arrows, multiple phantom arrows. The first 3 arrows flew in a spiral, and the last 3 arrows quickly caught up and collided with each other in the air. They changed their trajectories by relying on the warrior energy attached to them. No one could catch the arrows after they changed their trajectories. It was as if the 6 arrows had turned into 100 arrows, and the sky was filled with the shadows of arrows. The wave-like attack of the sword saint and the crazy bite of a ferocious beast made Snyder unable to concentrate. As a result, Snyder couldn't focus his attention at all. He couldn't see the trajectory of the arrow, nor could he fly again. Naturally, he couldn't dodge this ultimate attack. The next moment he felt dizzy. He raised his long sword hesitantly to block the arrows. The shadows of the arrows disappeared, but he did not block anything. In an instant, his left knee was in great pain. All 6 arrows hit the same point. Although they did not penetrate the armor, the concentrated explosion from the same point made a deep dent in the armor. The warrior energy exploded. His knee was hit so hard that it was almost twisted. His whole leg was numb and it was difficult to even lift it. When he looked up again he saw Dosen opening his bloody mouth and biting at him. Go away. He summoned his thunder warrior energy and fiercely slashed with his sword. He used all his strength in this slash, and it was so exquisite that Dosen could not dodge it. His shoulder was directly cut and Dosen screamed and flew out. However, this was also Snyder's last show of strength. Puff. Chapter 385. Snyder did not die. The Sky Knight was pierced through the chest by Llewellyn's sword. His strong physique still supported his vitality, but he lost his combat effectiveness and was seriously injured and dying. The battlefield quickly ended with Snyder's curtain call, and the Knight of Caraway Castle disappeared. These knights, who had spent countless resources to cultivate, all ended here because of the Grand Duke's anger. List, who had calmed down, could not help but sigh. The number of knights sacrificed in several years of development was probably not as many as the number killed in the Battle of Ironhoof Island. The Earth Knight, who was high and mighty in the eyes of the civilians, was harvested like a dog. The shock existed in the hearts of every knight who had won the battle. However, this was the aristocracy under the knight system. Traitors had to pay with their lives in order to deter more knights to be loyal to their lord. Collect the names of all the victims and give them to me. The Earl rode his horse and slowly walked through the blood-soaked battlefield. He said in a low voice, "Their lives will not be sacrificed in vain. Their glory will be passed on to their children, and you will also enjoy the supreme glory after the war. Roar! Roar! The victorious knights raised their spears and swords and shouted in response to the count's promise. When the shouting stopped, the battlefield that should be cleaned continued to be cleaned. Captain Lydon and Viscount Jonas were busy counting the casualties. Marcus rode to List's side and reported solemnly, "My lord, Russell Steele died in battle." Russell Steele. The Earth Knight who joined him with Randy Kettle was second only to Marcus. He was one of the first to become List's followers and often attended banquets in the castle. Compared to the last follower, Leslie Dead Leaves, Russell Steele was more familiar to List. After a moment of silence, he forced himself to cheer up. "I will remember his name, Teacher Marcus. Tell everyone in the Knight Squad that glory is waiting on the road ahead. At the end of the battle, everyone can enjoy it, whether sacrificed or survived." From the moment we entered the battlefield, we all understood this principle. To be able to charge and die in battle for our Lord is also our honor. Marcus clenched his fist and replied, "Moreover, we are very honored to be able to follow behind you, my lord. With your strength, you can already participate in the Battle of the Sky Knight, and you will definitely obtain noble authority." A noble authority, how? List gazed into the distance. In the Battle of Oxhair City, his battle achievements were absolutely glorious. First, he defeated the Orders of Chivalry in the main city, then rushed to the aid of the Little River City and attacked the Nameless Castle. Together with Levis and Trick, they seized the Greenleaf Castle. Finally, he returned to Oxhair City and assisted the Earl in killing the Sky Knight. Such a contribution might not be enough to make him a Viscount, but it was definitely not far away. After the rest, he might be able to participate in the Battle of Ironhoof City and get another credit. In this way, the Viscount of Black Horse Island was already a sure thing. One step at a time. Sooner or later, what belongs to me will be mine and no one can take it away. Turning his head and calling Dosen, whose shoulder was injured, staggered to catch up. Snade's sword was far from what the one-year-old Dosen could contend with. If it was a one-on-one fight, Dosen might have been beheaded. Touching Dosen's big head, List rode the chocobo and rushed to the occupied Caraway Castle. The Earl had taken the seriously injured Snade to the castle for interrogation. Perhaps he could find out the secret behind the dragon-slaying incident from his mouth. In the room, the Earl was interrogating Snade. "What order did the Marquis Bull give you?" Snade clutched his chest, his breath was weak, but he was surprisingly cooperative. "Defend Oxhair City and resist the invasion of the Orders of Chivalry on Ironhoof Island." "Why did he do that, do you know?" "Of course I know, because the Marquis is going to complete the great cause of dragon slaying." "Do you think you can participate in something like dragon slaying?" "The Grand Duchy of Sapphire has lost its dragon. Do you think you, or all of us, can get a better ending?" "I can't decide all this, but I'm looking forward to change." Snade's eyes were a little unfocused. "The Marquis has already made all arrangements, including now. Everything is within his plan. Lee William, you did beat me today, but it doesn't mean you can still win in the future." The Earl sneered, "You're going to die, how can you beat me? When the Grand Duchy of Sapphire disintegrates, you people will be buried with it. My children have been safely transferred, and they will regain the glory of Caraway Castle and go further." "Disintegrate?" "No, the Grand Duchy of Sapphire won't disintegrate, but the Ironhoof Island will definitely be destroyed. In fact, the Orders of Chivalry that Marquis Bull used to break out have been blocked by the Grand Duke's Orders of Chivalry. None of you can escape from the Ironhoof Island, and your children can't survive. They will be burned to ashes by the Grand Duke's anger. Haha, you'll soon know that the Sapphire Dragon is dead, or not dead, but it will be seriously injured and dying, and then—" Snade raised his head, looked at the Earl and grinned, "Ahem, there will be a new wave of assassinations. That dragon won't live long." A new wave of assassinations. According to the time, the assassinations should have ended, and the news of the Sapphire Dragon's death will soon spread to the Eagle Kingdom and the Iron and Steel Ridge Kingdom. Especially the Eagle Kingdom's Orders of Chivalry, they will soon launch an attack across the sea to clear this area. The new wave of assassinations shocked Lee William. But he didn't show it and remained calm. "I'm very curious. What good will the Eagle Kingdom get for clearing this area?" "Sir Marquis will lead us back to the mainland." "Back to the mainland?" The Earl shook his head and said in a sarcastic tone, "How much glory can we get even if we return to the mainland after losing our foothold?" Everyone yearned for the mainland. The Sapphire family couldn't get a foothold on the mainland, so they came to this sea to establish a country. Although it was remote and lacked resources, it was a piece of land that could shelter them from the wind and rain. The nobles here were used to the current way of life. The war was far away from the islands and took place on the mainland. Few people wanted to return to the mainland, so they had taken root on the islands in this sea. Then he asked again, but Sneyd couldn't reveal any more information. What do you think of what Sneyd said? After a round of interrogation, the Earl asked several orders of chivalry. Will the Sapphire Dragon really be assassinated a second time? I doubt it. I think he's just bluffing and the Grand Duke won't let his defense down, Levis said. List pondered for a moment. He put forward his opinion. Father should immediately contact Marquis Grindstone and test his reaction. I believe that Marquis Grindstone definitely knows about the situation of the Sapphire Dragon. Or we can continue at our own pace. If there's any news, it will soon spread. Why don't we see how the other families react? Lee William was just the Earl of Coral Island. There were still 6 marquises in front of him to attract attention, so there was no need to act in a high-profile manner. Immediately, List added, and I suspect that things may not be as Sneyd said. His son is likely to be controlled by Marquis Bull, so he has no choice but to defend Vanilla Celery Castle. And the second wave of assassination of the Sapphire Dragon is just a rumor deliberately spread by Marquis Bull. Chapter 386. The interrogation lasted for half an hour. The result was the same. I have nothing to say. William, give me a quick death. Sneyd was coughing up blood. He couldn't hold on any longer. This is pointless persistence. Lee William shook his head and sighed. It doesn't matter if you say it or not. The glory of the night is always on my side. After that, he pulled out his sword and pierced it into Sneyder's chest. Blood gushed out along the blade. Sneyd's pupils suddenly dilated and then contracted violently. All his breath stopped at this moment. He died, the Sky Knight, died in one of his rooms in Caraway Castle. Wuxia. Lee William pulled out his long sword and strode out of the room. At the same time he ordered, arrange for tonight's vigil. We will be stationed at Caraway Castle for a day and wait for the next step of the battle plan. Yes, my lord. In the study. List was searching carefully. The Count had already killed Sneyder, and his smoke mission had been completed. Mission completed. Reward. Advanced Do Chi Manual 15 kg Thunder Sky Shocking Flash. Without a doubt. It was not the secret book of fire attribute that List expected, but the secret book of thunder attribute that Sneyd cultivated. No matter what, with this high-grade Chi secret manual, he could use it to trade for a high-grade fire attribute Do Chi manual. The nobles had a monopoly on high-level combat aura manuals, but no one would mind collecting more types of combat manuals. Even if they did not use it for themselves, they would still use it for their descendants. The attribute of combat aura was only slightly related to bloodline inheritance. There were many people who had different attributes between their fathers and sons, and List was one of them. When he first transmigrated, he seriously wondered if he was the descendant of old Wang next door. After all, the Count's fighting chi was of the water attribute. His brother and sister were also of the water attribute. His grandfather, uncle, and cousin were not of the fire attribute. He was the only one with a fire attribute Do Chi in this big family, which was a little embarrassing. However, most of his appearance was inherited from his mother, Melissa, and a small part still had the Count's shadow. All in all, he was undoubtedly of the Count's bloodline. He had only inherited the best genes from his parents. Where is this 15 kg Thunder Sky Shock Flash hidden? Sneyder should observe and speculate from time to time. It's impossible for him to hide in a secluded place. Lord Baron, please take a look and see if this is what you need. The knight sent by the Count to check the spoils walked over with a thick book in his hand. This was found in Sneyd's bedside cabinet in his bedroom. It's a handwritten copy. Judging from the name, it seems to be a senior book of fighting chi. He took the book. Seeing the familiar handwritten words 15 kg Thunderclap Skyshock Flash, he immediately heaved a sigh of relief. This was the book without a doubt. Tell the Count that I'll keep this secret manual for now. I'll make a copy for him later. Yes, Lord Baron. List finally had the mood to look at the updated smoke mission after obtaining the high-level Chi secret manual. Mission. Count Sneyd's last sword strike caused serious damage to Trembling Woods. Apart from physical damage, it also caused mental damage, making it feel the threat of life and death. Please build a suit of armor for it to increase its sense of security. Reward, Dosun's new magic. Oh. Seeing the mission reward, List felt much better. Dosun is going to learn a new magic. It seems that this war has made it grow up quickly. Sneyder's last sword had hurt Dosun's bones. But with World of Warcraft's physique, it was not a problem. The wound would heal itself after a while. But he did not expect that Dosun's soul was also hurt, and it needed armor to increase its sense of security. Then make one for it. There are too many Earth Knights who died in the battle. Since we have collected a set of fine steel armor, we can dismantle several sets of armor and tie some pieces of armor together with silk thread to make a dog armor for Dosun. Horses had horse armor, so dogs could have dog armor. Immediately he sent a squire knight to dismantle the armor. In order to fit the knight's fine steel armor, it was made of pieces of perforated iron and tied together with special silk thread. As long as the iron pieces were collected and tied again, a bigger armor could be made. Just use this method to make an armor similar to Mackay's for Dosun. Do you understand? He instructed for a while and then became impatient. As the commander of the Orders of Chivalry, he had a lot of work to do. So he could only ask the squire knight to do it. As for himself, he was involved in the distribution of the spoils of war and future battle plans. The spoils that could not be divided would naturally be sealed up, and the spoils that could be taken away would not be left to the Grand Duke. Such a heavy casualty rate was the highest among all the previous pioneering orders, and a large number of spoils of war were needed to make up for it. There are no elves, no precious treasures, but we found a lot of magic equipment from the dead knights. I will distribute these according to the contribution of each of your orders of chivalry. Just complete the distribution, don't leave anything behind, don't give other people an excuse. The Count said. Liszt and the others naturally agreed, yes, Sir Count. Among all the orders of chivalry, the Black Orders of Chivalry received the most magic equipment. The Count even assigned Snyder's sword to Liszt. Liszt, I am proud of you. I have always looked forward to us fighting side by side, but I never thought that you could help me kill the Sky Knight so soon. The Count patted Liszt on the shoulder with relief. His son, who had disappointed him the most, had become the best young knight. At the age of 17, he could already intervene in the battle between the Sky Knight. Although most of the credit should be given to Dosun, Liszt's own superb archery was also commendable. Snyder's sword is a gemstone weapon that is not much worse than my sword. If I am not mistaken, the material of the blade is derived from the thigh bone of some intermediate World of Warcraft. It is very finely polished and plated with a lot of fine gold by the magician. It is indestructible. The nature of the magic metal fine gold was indestructible. It was a big sword with a slightly curved blade, a bit like an English broadsword. It was slightly shorter than the red blood sword that Liszt used, which was similar to the German double-edged sword, but the blade was wider. It was also inlaid with a blue gem, which should be the sapphire produced by the sapphire dragon. He received it. He couldn't help but weigh the weight of the sword. It was more than twice as heavy as the red blood sword, which might have been added with mithril, but it felt more comfortable. The bone blade and the fine gold plated with magic made its sharpness very outstanding. The sapphire inlaid at the end of the hilt made it full of power. The magical nature of the sapphire was power. It could make the user exert more power. It was obviously different from the ruby's increase in fighting energy. There is a magic array engraved on its hilt, which can quickly draw the power of the sapphire to burst out a more powerful blow. The sword that injured Dosun should be using the power of this magic array. The Count explained, you can now give it a new name. Sky Cutter Greatsword. Liszt named it without hesitation. Sky Cutter Greatsword. The great sword that killed the Sky Knight. Levis looked at the Sky Cutter Greatsword enviously. This name is a bit imposing. Sky Cutter Greatsword. Liszt wanted to remind everyone that this sword was obtained by helping the Count kill the Sky Knight, for fear that everyone would forget this. Chapter 387. The value of the Sky Cutter Greatsword was difficult to judge. According to its gem embedding, the price difference between sapphires and rubies was not big. Purely regarded as a gem weapon, it was on the same level as the red blood sword. Compared to the Count's sword with 2 gems embedded, there was a big gap. A single gem was easy to embed, but 2 gems required a high level of skill, because it was difficult to coordinate the interference between the gems. However, the Sky Cutter Greatsword was not a standard gem weapon. Its hilt was engraved with a magic array, which was a feature of magic equipment. With the blessing of this magic array, it could better exert the power of the sapphires. In addition, its blade was made of intermediate World of Warcraft bones mixed with the magic metal adamantine. This material was much better than the red blood sword's adamantine steel mixed with mithril. In my opinion, its value may be lower than that of the Swift Shadow Bow, but higher than that of the red blood sword. Liszt had decided to use it to replace his red blood sword. As for the red blood sword, it could be kept in the gem space as a backup weapon. After the meeting, List quickly presided over the distribution of Black Orders of Chivalry's merits, mainly the distribution of magic equipment. There were a total of 11 magic equipment and he picked 2 of them. One was an amplification bracelet, which could slightly increase one's chi level. After replacing the red blood sword with the Sky Cutter greatsword, he needed a magic equipment to replace the red blood sword. The amplification bracelet was very weak, but it was better than nothing. The other was a stabilizer ring worn on the thumb, which could stabilize the chi in the hand when shooting, thereby improving the accuracy of archery. He did not rely on these magic equipment very much. But now that he had it, why not use it? Even if he didn't use it, it would be good to keep it in the gem space. All the knight participated in the distribution of this batch of privately distributed materials, gold coins and magic equipment, as well as several ordinary chi manuals. The distribution of materials was recorded by a special person, and when the merits were distributed after returning to Coral Island, these materials distributed in advance had to be counted. Subsequently, List began his new job, taming the Chocobo Loki. Now was the critical period of taming. The Chocobo was on the verge of transformation, and the magic power in its body could leak out at any time. Therefore, List intended to establish a conditioned reflex with Loki as soon as possible and establish a riding relationship. The Chocobos had already helped him in the battle against the Sky Knight. His next step was to have the Chocobos charge alongside him. A normal warhorse's charge speed is around 60 km per hour, which happens to be the most common running speed for a Chocobo, and it can run for most of the day without stopping. He tamed the Chocobo until late at night, then fed it himself before returning to the castle. He couldn't sleep, he had to take potions and practice aura decay. No matter how difficult the conditions were, he couldn't fall behind on his homework. In fact, the conditions weren't too difficult. Food, drink, and daily necessities were all stored in the gem space. World of Warcraft meat, potions, dragon milk, everything was there. Just as he was about to take a shower, someone knocked on his door. "My lord, Dosen's armor has been made, but Dosen doesn't want to wear it." It was the retainer knight Xavier who came in. He was quick-witted and highly regarded by List. "I'll go take a look." Arriving at Dosen's tent, he was gnawing on a big bone, and a few retainer knights were holding the armor and standing to the side. Dosen didn't want to wear the armor, and they didn't dare to force him. Now that List was here, Dosen was soon forced to wear the dog armor. The armor protected his neck and upper body, which were the most vulnerable parts of his body. As for the helmet, it wasn't made for Dosen. For one thing, there was no blacksmith to make a suitable helmet, and for another, the helmet might affect Dosen's magic. Dosen, who was wearing the dog armor, was a bit uncomfortable and always wanted to take it off. List's mind turned. He thought of the situation when he taught Dosen the new magic rock wall simulation demonstration. He found a stone and smashed it in front of Dosen. Dosen was puzzled and decided to continue gnawing on its big bone. Soon, List put a half-dismantled fine steel armor on the stone and smashed it again. Clang, clang. The stone under the protection of the armor didn't break. He shook the stone in front of Dosen and repeated this routine, trying to make Dosen understand that the armor could protect it. However, Dosen still didn't want to wear the armor. It went on for an hour. It was late at night, but it still refused to wear the dog armor. Just as List was getting impatient, Trembling Wood suddenly opened its mouth. The next moment, a layer of cracked rock quickly appeared on the surface of its body, wrapping itself in it. But it was only partially wrapped and most of its torso was still exposed. "Oh." List raised his eyebrows. "Very good, it seems that the magic you learned can completely replace this dog armor, so." Dosen, try taking 2 steps. The cracked rock armor was distributed on the neck, forehead, shoulders, back and thighs. It looked like it was glued to the body, cracking or shrinking as it walked, but it didn't affect its movement. Woof woof. Dosen barked proudly, showing off its new armor. List hammered the rock armor. It was very strong and didn't look like ordinary rock. It seemed to have reached the level of crystal. A faint grayish-yellow color, small under the candlelight and a little transparent. With force, one could break off one of the pieces. Then he stabbed it with his spear. Bang bang. The stone was blown away, but it didn't crack immediately. With my strength just now, even a fine steel armor could have a hole, but the stone didn't crack. This hardness is almost as hard as mithril armor. List was very surprised. He then summoned the smoke mission. Mission completed. Reward Dosen's new magic rock armor. Rock armor? I remember Elksun said that among the earth magic, there is a magic that can only be mastered by a great mage called rock armor. It can be used to arm oneself like armor and defend against attacks. Many great mages who are proficient in earth magic like to study rock armor. However, there are very few great mages who have successfully learned this magic. Of course, there are very few mages. My Dosen is getting stronger and stronger. He cast magic eyes and took a look at the level of magic consumption. He found that Dosen's magic was much thinner. It seemed that the rock armor consumed a lot of magic. He couldn't help but pat the stones on Dosen's body. Dosen, take it off. Can you take it off? He made a few gestures. Trembling Woods quickly understood. It shook its body as if it was shaking water, and the yellowish-gray stones were thrown everywhere. Not a single one was left. Very well, now let's learn a new password, Dosen rock armor. List decided to strike while the iron was hot and let Dosen adapt to its new magic as soon as possible. Chapter 388. Stone armor consumes a lot of magic power. According to List's observation, if Dosen needs 1 point of magic power to release rock thorns, 5 points of magic power to release rock grenades, and 7 points of magic power to release rock walls, then it takes at least 20 points of magic power to release stone armor. I'm afraid it has something to do with the degree of solidification of the rock. The rock of the stone armor is about to crystallize into a gem. The rock walls, rock grenades, and rock thorns are just rocks. Quantitative change leads to qualitative change. The more magic power is consumed, the higher the quality of the rock. With this set of stone armor, Dosen's combat effectiveness will be even more explosive in the future. He can charge and break through enemy lines, dismantle towers, and defend his home. After training until midnight, Dosen could already understand the instructions of Dosen, stone armor, and List yawned and went back to sleep. He was also very tired today. The charge consumed a lot of physical strength. Before going to bed, he suddenly missed Flower Town, the elves, the Siren Chi, the servants in the castle, the wheat worm that he had not yet contracted, and the 8 little ones that he did not know if they had learned how to release magic. He has never given up his dream of training a blizzard beast army. In a trance, illusory smoke serpentines slowly appeared in front of him. Mission: the knight who is flying in a hurry is bringing new news. It is unknown how tomorrow's battle will start, but you also have the opportunity to become a member of the Flying Knight. Please assist the Chocobo Loki and master the way to release magic. Reward: Loki's magic. This was a new smoke mission. The content was very exciting. It turned out that List could become a member of the Flying Knight. He couldn't help but feel excited. It's time for Loki to release magic. What magic will it be? Looking at the smoke serpentines, Loki will soon be able to fly? It's not a bird of prey? Birds, such as ostriches, emus, and kiwis, are good at running and cannot fly. The chocobo is very much in line with the characteristics of a bird, with long legs that can run at high speed, a fat body, and wings that are so short that they can be ignored. He really doesn't know how it can fly. Maybe it's just a fledgling. When it matures, its wings will grow and it will become a wading bird similar to the red-crowned crane. List thought to himself. Wading birds had a pair of long legs and liked to live near the water, searching for food from the bottom of the water or in the mud. Cranes, storks, snipes, and bustards were all wading birds. Chocobos like this can barely dive into the water with their long legs. Something's wrong. List suddenly remembered that a chocobo's long legs were covered in feathers, and with feathers it would be difficult to walk comfortably in the water, so it wouldn't be a wading bird. So, no matter how he thought about it, List couldn't figure out how a chocobo could fly, and besides, its name was clearly a chocobo. How could it fly? The next day they continued to rest in Caraway Castle. The Earl was still waiting for Marquis Grindington's next move in the war, while List continued taming the chocobos and tried to help them learn how to use magic. His relationship with the chocobos wasn't as close as Dosen's, so it was difficult for him to infuse it with combat chi and direct its magic. So, he could only do some superficial work, such as stimulating the chocobo's magic to release it and complete the basic casting of magic. It was a bit difficult, so he hadn't succeeded yet. But there was one change that List could feel. As Loki's magic became more abundant, its running speed, stamina, and jumping ability all improved. It was obviously still maturing, and when it fully matured, it would probably be even more powerful. After all, it was a low-level dragon and had the World of Warcraft bloodline. Walking the bird. And so the leisure time passed. He didn't rest for long. At dusk, a messenger knight sent by Marquis Grindington arrived at Caraway Castle with a new order. Earl William, the Marquis has ordered you to immediately lead the orders of chivalry to Oxbine City in the west. He needs to see you the day after tomorrow. Why the rush? The Earl frowned. It would take an entire day to march from Oxbine City to Oxbine City. He's forcing us to travel at night. I don't know, the Marquis didn't say why, but when I left, the Marquis was also leading the orders of chivalry to Oxbine City. According to the marching time, to reach Oxbine City in the morning after tomorrow, the Marquis will also need to march at night. Marching at night was not a good decision, it was easy to be ambushed. But the order had been delivered, and all that was needed was to carry it out. After resting for a day, the orders of chivalry had recovered to their peak condition. Leaving behind some wounded to continue to defend Caraway Castle, the Earl immediately led the knights to break camp and head west. List was no exception. Riding a chocobo, he led the black orders of chivalry and set off with the troops. They galloped all the way. Everyone was exhausted and finally reached Oxbine City safely. At the same time, Grindington's orders of chivalry had just arrived at Oxbine City. There were also the troops of several other earls, all of whom had just arrived. The first prince has occupied Ironhoof City, which the Bull family has cultivated for generations, and even Bull Castle has been occupied. However, no battle has taken place and Bull Castle is already an empty city. As early as a month ago, before the assassination, the traitor Andy had already transferred the people of Bull Castle to the sea. Grindenton Red Maple Leaf's expression was solemn, and his magic lines became more and more profound. Most of the wealth on Ironhoof Island, as well as the seeds of various aristocratic families, have already fled overseas. It may be the Eagle Kingdom or the Iron and Steel Ridge Kingdom, there is no way to know. So, Sir Marquis, is the Bull Marquis still on Ironhoof Island? This is why I called you here. Grindenton spread out a map of Ironhoof Island, and used his hand to draw a circle on the large area between Oxbine City and Oxtail City. The orders of chivalry of Wrath were repelled by the orders of chivalry that rushed over and escaped into this area. All the estuaries have been sealed and they can only continue to hide. He looked around at the earls and said coldly, our mission is to find the orders of chivalry of Wrath, the traitor Andy, and those evil goat assembly magicians. The Grand Duke's instructions are to find them and kill them, no survivors. Then, Grindenton showed them the information he had on the orders of chivalry of Wrath and the goat assembly, including the composition of their members. He then assigned tasks. Oxbine City, these 2 big cities and the 9 small cities below them. We will mainly search these 4 small cities. Earl Lee William, you need to lead the orders of chivalry of Coral Island, and carefully search for Sydney City, do not miss any clues. The tasks were assigned. Grindenton finally said, the Grand Duke's wrath will burn for a long time, until the entire Bull family is destroyed no matter where they hide. And now, we need to destroy their main force and break the traitor's backbone. This is what we need to do. Ironhoof Island, it's time to end. He paused. Chapter 389. This chapter is The Night Flight of the Solitary Swan. The meeting ended. Lee William found Marquis Grindenton in private and asked, is there any feedback on the second wave of dragon assassinations revealed by Snade? It's fake news. Do you think Marquis Bull has the strength to assassinate the Sapphire Dragon now that he's trapped on Ironhoof Island? Grindenton denied it directly. Thinking about it, this was indeed the case. Severely injuring the Sapphire Dragon once was already worthy of Marquis Bull's 30 years of planning. Wouldn't another assassination mean that the Sapphire family's efforts on Blue Dragon Island were all in vain? Unless the Sapphire family raised pigs, it would be impossible for an assassin to assassinate a dragon twice in a row. The battle at Ox Ridge City did not take much effort. The castle was very sturdy, but under the siege of many Sky Knights, it could not hold on and was captured in half a day. After they entered the castle and rested for a while, Lee William led the 4 knight regiments of Coral Island out of the castle and headed towards Schweppere City for a search. In order to find the hidden orders of chivalry and goat-gathering mages, Lee William personally searched every town. He did not separate the orders of chivalry to prevent sneak attacks. Everyone knew that great military achievements were hidden in this area. However, Marquis Bull was not someone to be trifled with. If he was not careful, he could be wiped out by the orders of chivalry just like the second prince. With the binoculars, danger could be avoided in advance. Therefore, List did not care about finding the orders of chivalry. He just repeatedly controlled the chocobos and guided them to release magic. It had clearly reached the critical point of mana release, but it still did not learn magic. This made List wonder how the players in World of Warcraft mastered magic. No one taught them, which meant that World of Warcraft would not be able to release magic for a long time. Cluck. Loki chirped, sounding like a mix of a chicken and a duck. It was now full of food, running diligently, full of magic power, and full of physical strength. It no longer needed the thorn potion to continue stimulating it. In fact, List did not have much thorn potion in stock, and he did not even have enough potions for himself. Faster, Loki. Run at full speed. Clatter. Clatter. Under List's urging, the chocobos were flying at full speed, already exceeding 200 kilometers per hour and still accelerating. The wind whistled in List's ears. He had to bend down and hug Loki's neck tightly to minimize his wind resistance and adjust his movements to keep up with Loki's rhythm. As an elite Earth Knight, his riding skills are excellent, so after several adaptations he has been well integrated into the rhythm of Loki's running pace. At this time, Loki could cross dozens of meters in one step. It was more like gliding on the ground than running. The surrounding scenery had already lost its image, turning into a series of afterimages as it rapidly retreated. Clack, clack. Loki's voice was also distorted by the wind and could not be heard clearly. However, List could feel that it was moving at a speed that it had never reached before. At least 250 kilometers per hour. List looked up slightly, watching the scene in front of him, equally excited. The faster Loki ran, the higher its value. Although its combat power was not good, in terms of wandering and chasing, it was definitely better than a horse. Even a dragon horse like the Black Blood horse could not compare. Clack, clack. Loki ran and suddenly began to jump, jumping very high with each step. After jumping back and forth several times, List was a little puzzled. Why did it suddenly change to jumping when it was running well? However, the next moment he found that things were different. This time, Loki's jump did not stop for a short period of time before landing. Instead, it was as if a cyclone was supporting it, allowing it to glide in the air less than 5 meters away from the ground. It lasted for more than 10 seconds before landing on the ground. Then it jumped again and glided in the air. Casting magic eyes, List saw that every time Loki jumped, a part of the magic in its body would be drawn. It was releasing magic. This is lightness. Mages who study wind magic basically know this kind of magic, condensing wind magic to lift the body or lift heavy objects to reduce weight. It was not a very difficult magic and its power was limited, but with Loki, it was like a divine help. Loki's high-speed running and jumping state was equivalent to gliding on the ground, and with the use of lightness, gliding became a basic operation. Loki, jump. He gave the order. Clack. Loki responded with lightness magic. Then he jumped high. This jump was like a bouncing ball bouncing from the ground, and the height continued to rise. It was not until the ground scenery became smaller that the momentum slowed down, hovering in the air for more than 10 seconds and finally slowly landed. There was not much movement when it landed, and the lifting of wind magic greatly reduced Loki's weight. At least 10 meters, more than the height of a 3-story building. List was very proud. Such a Loki, although still far from flying, was no longer limited to the ground. It could barely be called a flying mount. Sure enough, I became a flying knight. On the way back, the smoke serpentines lingered in front of him. Quest completed. Reward, Loki magic, lightness. Then it was replaced by new serpentines. Quest, search for the orders of chivalry of wrath and the gathering of goats in progress. Perhaps this is the end of Marquis Ox, but no one knows the final outcome. Please wait patiently for the end of the war. Reward, unknown reward. Another waiting quest with an unknown reward. Last time was waiting for the new year to pass, this time is waiting for the war to end. Is there anything in common? List didn't find anything special about this type of quest. He didn't bother and just looked forward to it. I don't know what the unknown reward is this time. The unknown reward for the new year was a chi. Will it also be a legendary creature this time? A unicorn that symbolizes purity, a mermaid that is as attractive as a siren or a great elf. At the very least, a beautiful female vampire is also good. When he returned to the camp stationed in the town, before he had time to take a sip of water, he was immediately notified to attend a meeting. Soon he knew the topic of the meeting. It turned out that his uncle Masiro had sent a secret messenger to convey some news to the Count and his son. There must be something wrong with the Grand Duke's dragon, and it is a very serious problem. According to our channels in the palace, the Grand Duke has left the palace with the dragon, and his whereabouts are unknown. Whereabouts unknown. Yes, no one has found out where the Grand Duke has gone, including the Sapphire family. Many people don't know where the Grand Duke has gone. Chapter 390. The Sapphire Dragon did not live in the Sapphire Grand Duke's castle, the Blue Sky Mountain Palace. Instead, it rested in the cliff valley at the foot of the Blue Sky Mountain Palace, which was called the Blue Dragon Garden. The Blue Dragon Garden was huge, probably larger than Coral Island. Every day, palace servants entered the Blue Dragon Garden to pick up the gems produced by the Sapphire Dragon and look for mineral deposits that had been infected with crystals. Sometimes, the major guilds would train blue blood orders of chivalry in the Blue Dragon Garden, or hunt in the Blue Dragon Garden. A large number of beasts in World of Warcraft were raised here as food for the Sapphire Dragon. At the time of the dragon-slaying incident, the Grand Duke was hunting with Marquis Bull. Then the dragon-slaying incident broke out. According to the rumors, Marquis Bull and his wizards had already secretly set up a huge magic array in the Blue Dragon Garden. When the Sapphire Dragon stepped into the magic array, the array was immediately activated and the Sapphire Dragon was seriously injured. Marquis Bull took advantage of the civil strife to escape Blue Dragon Island. The secret messenger told him everything he knew. The Grand Duke issued the order to encircle Ironhoof Island and then left the Blue Sky Mountain Palace. It was only discovered after several days. Madame Sarit has already taken control of the palace and is purging the suspicious servants in the palace with the support of Marquis Nesta. The Sapphire Grand Duke disappeared with his dragon. The Grand Duke's wife, Madame Sarit, who was born in the Grand Flower Whalen family, was purging the palace servants who might be involved in the dragon-slaying incident with the support of her brother, Marquis Nesta Grand Flower Whalen. The Grand Duke's two sons and his son-in-law, Marquis Grindenton, came to encircle Ironhoof Island. This was the current environment of the Grand Duchy of Sapphire. No one knows where the Grand Duke went? Maybe Madame Sarit knows but no one else knows. Maybe someone knows but we can't find out. Marquis Merlin and Brother Mesiro, do you have any plans? Not yet. After Marquis Merlin received your letter, he asked Sir Mesiro to tell you. Tell me what? Lee William listened attentively. The secret messenger replied, he has been with the Grand Duke for half his life and is very familiar with his old friend's style and methods. He hopes that you won't easily lose confidence in the Grand Duke before the dust disperses. I understand. The Count nodded and said, I also have some information here that I hope you can pass on to Brother Mesiro. As you wish. Obviously. After seeing off the secret messenger, Liszt expressed his opinion. Grandfather's opinion is wise and prudent. He hopes that we will wait and see and not make a hasty decision. The Grand Duke left with the Sapphire Dragon. There must be a more important plan that can determine the future plans. So we still don't do anything? Levis frowned. I always feel that this is indeed calm but not really appropriate. What if the Eagle Kingdom intervenes? Liszt pondered for a moment and replied calmly, fight. Fight? As long as the Eagle Kingdom doesn't send out the Dragon Knight, what do we have to worry about? The Marquis family will not compromise easily. As long as we repel the orders of chivalry's attack, we will be able to prove our strength. I believe that whether it is the King of the Eagle Kingdom or the King of the Steel Ridge Kingdom, they will not mind having a group of powerful followers. This was also a well-established strategy. Before things became clear, obey the Sapphire family, show loyalty and demonstrate value. All that was left was to choose which log to perch on. Liszt, who had experienced the baptism of war, was very high-spirited at this moment. He was not afraid of any situation. In any case, we should not miss the opportunity to kill the Marquis Bull. For the sake of the family's interests and for the sake of venting one's emotions, the rebels should be killed. Without the Marquis Bull's tricks, Liszt would still be peacefully farming in the Flower Town, waiting for this year's order of exploration. He liked this kind of step-by-step lifestyle and did not like too many unforeseen events. Therefore he did not have a good impression of the Marquis Bull. This was a personal sentiment. From the perspective of interests, regardless of whether the Sapphire Dragon was dead or alive, the Marquis Bull should be destroyed. If the dragon was alive, he could curry favor with the Grand Duke. If the dragon was dead, he could prove his loyalty and eliminate his competitors. The Bull family, which had transferred their heirs and wealth overseas, was definitely the domestic aristocrats' biggest competitor. Even though the land was vast and boundless, there were not many resources that could be grabbed. If the Marquis Bull ate more, the others would have to eat less. This was the general principle. After the discussion between the two sons, the Count wanted to express some far-sighted opinions. However, Liszt had said all that needed to be said and there was really nothing worth adding. This made him very upset. He could only grasp a few details and repeat his lines. Subsequently, he continued to look for traces of the angry orders of chivalry and the Goat Assembly. Set out on June 7th, landed in the Oxhorn city on the 11th, set out for the main city on the 13th, and captured the nameless castle of the main city on the 14th. On the 15th he went to Oxhare city. On the 16th he rushed to Small River city. On the 17th he captured the nameless castle of Small River city. On the 18th he supported Tree Shade city. On the 20th he captured the Greenleaf castle of Tree Shade city. On the 21st he went to Oxhare city again. On the 23rd he captured the fragrant celery castle of Oxhare city. On the evening of the 24th he left for Ox Spine city. On the evening of the 25th he arrived at Ox Spine city. On the 26th he captured the castle of Ox Spine city. On the 27th he left for Schweppere city. Today it was already June 30th. After searching for 2.5 days in the towns near Schweppere city, every town was thoroughly cleaned up. No traces of the angry orders of chivalry and the goat assembly were found. There is no need to look any more. Directly attack the city and occupy the Pear castle of Schweppere city. The count ordered. The orders of chivalry surrounded the Viscount's castle, Pear castle. Dosen came out and bombarded the castle with rock grenades. The castle collapsed and the war soon ended. At the same time, the battlefields of several other cities also received good news. With the Count's orders of chivalry, it was really easy to destroy the castle guarded by the Viscount. July 2nd. The Coral Islands orders of chivalry and the other Count's orders of chivalry, under the leadership of Marquis Grindenton, went straight to one of the last two cities, Oxtail City, where they met up with the Second Prince's orders of chivalry. The Second Prince's blue blood orders of chivalry had been destroyed, and Marquis Ramirez White Glutinous Rice, who had accompanied him to capture Oxtail City, had also suffered heavy losses. Thanks to the support of Wallace Pineapple and Mesiro Longtaro, the situation finally stabilized. Oxtail City. Orders of chivalry from the White Glutinous Rice family, the Pineapple family, and the Taro family, as well as many orders of chivalry from the Count families directly under the Grand Duke. In just 2 days he had taken down an earl guarding Oxbridge City. The current war is already one-sided. Everyone is competing for military merits. In the tent, the one chatting with List was his cousin Meepaul Longtaro. His golden orichalcum armor was indestructible and very eye-catching. Fortunately, he had the elite orders of chivalry directly under him. The golden orichalcum armor made him less conspicuous. Otherwise he would have become a live target on the battlefield. Of course. List held a cup containing local fresh milk. He had already finished drinking the dragon milk in stock. There is almost no danger. If I don't go for military merits, there is either something wrong with my head, or I'm like you, cousin, who doesn't need military merits to be conferred. In the battle to attack the castle, List took his orders of chivalry and frantically killed the enemy knight. Chapter 391. As the battle at Oxtendon City came to an end, the encirclement of Ironhoof Island became clear. The wrathful orders of chivalry's whereabouts were also discovered. They appeared around the last big city, Oxtendon City. This city was not given away and still belonged to Marquis Bull. Not only did the wrathful orders of chivalry appear in Oxtendon City, but the mages of the Goat Congregation also swaggered in and out of Oxtendon City to pick all kinds of magic materials. They did not want to avoid the encirclement of orders of chivalry that was about to surround Oxtendon City. They were fearless. The Maing orders of chivalry have located Marquis Bull. After the meeting, Lee William gathered his followers and announced the Second Prince's final battle plan. All orders of chivalry immediately break camp and head to Oxtendon City to meet up with the eldest prince to complete the encirclement of Milk Lake. List took a deep breath. Count Lee William, is this the final battle? Lee William glanced at his second son, who had been frantically fighting for credit in the last 2 battles, and felt very gratified. Yes, this is the final battle. Once this battle was over, perhaps the Tulip family would advance further. In any case, his son's growth at such a chaotic juncture was something to be congratulated for. 10 kilometers away from Oxtendon City, there was a huge lake called Milk Lake. In the middle of the lake there was a towering island. On the island there was a castle slightly larger than Tulip Castle, Juniper Castle. The castle's name came from the dense shrubs and small trees on the island, juniper trees. Juniper Castle was famous throughout the Grand Duchy of Sapphire. This was because it was the place where the famous cellar liquor Juniper Castle was produced. There was a rumor that was hard to determine whether it was true or false. It was said that the Bull Marquis family had a dragon spirit, a juniper dragon spirit with a lifespan of 500 years. It was responsible for brewing wine. This juniper dragon spirit was a gift from the first Grand Duke to his favorite son. Since then, it had become the family treasure of the Bull family. If this rumor was true, then the Grand Duchy of Sapphire had a total of 2 dragon elves, the Sapphire family and the Oat dragon elf. Because there were very few dragon elves, there were only a few more than dragons, so very few people knew what dragon elves looked like. List did not know either. I've collected information about dragon elves. The more reliable explanation is that evolving from an elf to a dragon elf requires the help of a dragon. Help from a dragon? Riding Black Dragon, Paris followed Liszt and set off with orders of chivalry. Now that Liszt could ride the chocobo and charge at will, he lent Black Dragon to Paris so that she could be a bit faster when rescuing him. You can also describe it as an infection. This is my own speculation. Liszt said, just like dragon-type beasts in World of Warcraft, dragons should be able to infect greater elves. Greater elves can then borrow the mystical power of dragons to complete their own transformation and become dragon elves. Is that so? I heard that dragon elves are the servants of dragons. There is a saying that dragon elves are very close to dragons and like to live around dragons. I've read some magic books that record that dragon elves appear around evil dragons. However, there are also several magic books and night novels that mention another interesting theory. What theory? Dragon elves are the servants of dragons, but when a dragon elf evolves into an elven king, dragons will become its mounts and be at its beck and call. Sir Baron, is there really an elven king in this world? This was a very interesting question. Perhaps most people would refute this theory and think that the elven king was just a legend, because no one had ever seen an elven king since ancient times, and there was no accurate description of an elven king. Some people said that an elven king was as big as a forest, some said that an elven king could ride a dragon. However, Liszt replied, there is an elven king in this world. Really? What does an elven king look like? Paris asked with great interest. I haven't seen one, I can't answer. His reliance was due to the legendary creatures appearing before his eyes one after another. First was the specter, then the dragon, then the lich, and soon the siren. Therefore, he would not be surprised if an elven king appeared in front of him one day. This world was not Earth. It did not necessarily have to abide by the theory of species evolution. Paris did not dwell on whether an elven king existed or not. She quickly thought, Sir Baron, why is the Marquis Bull not called the Marquis of Ironhoof Island, or why is his name not changed to Andy Juniper? According to the feudal system, the correct title of an aristocrat was a fief plus a title of nobility. For example, Lee William Tulip's title was Earl of Coral Island. Liszt Tulip's title was Flowertown's Baron. Only the Marquis Bull's title was Marquis Bull, not Ironhoof Island's Marquis. This is a memorial. Liszt knew the interesting story. Before the Sapphire family came to this part of the sea to establish a state, they were somewhere on the continent. At that time, the youngest son of the first Grand Duke had a nickname Little Bull. He was conferred the title of Earl Bull for the first time. Subsequently, the Sapphire family established a state. Little Bull was promoted to Marquis Bull and granted the Ironhoof Island. Perhaps because he did not want to change this close relationship, the title of Marquis Bull continued. As for his name, it was more or less the same. In order to show his close relationship with the Sapphire family, his surname had always been Sapphire. Of course, it was also possible that Marquis Bull did not have the Juniper Dragon sprite. Without the Juniper Dragon sprite, the surname naturally could not be Juniper. After marching for a day, they arrived at the shore of Milk Lake. The orders of chivalry that besieged the Ironhoof Islands smoothly met up and firmly surrounded the lake, ready to launch the final blow at any time. Liszt was also making his final preparations. This was the last battle of the campaign to besiege the Ironhoof Island. If he missed this opportunity, it would be difficult to snatch military exploits again. So far, the news of the death of the Sapphire Dragon had not arrived. The possible invasion army of the Eagle Kingdom had also not arrived. The battlefield became clearer and clearer. Marquis Bull could not escape his doom. He dipped the rag in a special turpentine and slowly wiped the Sky Cutter greatsword. This kind of maintenance work could reduce the wear and tear of the weapon and increase its service life. Any weapon would eventually become a scrap as it was continuously worn out. Even if it was a heavenly weapon made of dragon teeth, it would also decay over time. It was just that the speed of decay varied. Lord Baron? The messenger knight arrived. Lord Earl wants you to get ready. In half an hour you will follow him to attend the banquet. Got it. Half an hour later, Liszt, who was wearing the mithril armor, followed his father Lee William and brother Levis to the first prince's tent to attend the banquet tonight. Even though they were at war, they could not stop the nobles from eating and drinking. There were even wine glasses placed on the table. Were they going to drink to their heart's content at the front line of the war? Chapter 392. At the banquet, Liszt saw all kinds of aristocrats. Most of them were aristocrats with higher status than him, or aristocratic heirs who had yet to be titled. Marquis Wallace Pineapple Green of Deep Throat Island, Marquis Roderick Golden Wheat of Golden Island, Marquis Ramirez White Glutinous Rice of Leather Island, Marquis Glendinton Red Maple Leaf of Maple City. Liszt counted the marquises at the banquet to increase his impression. Of the 7 marquises of the Grand Duchy, 4 were gathered here. The other 3 marquises were not present. The Marquis of the Red Shoes, Merlin Longtaro, had already retired and was enjoying his retirement at home. The Marquis of the Bull, Andy Sapphire, had become a traitor and was surrounded. The last Marquis of Quicksand City, Nesta Great Flower, was currently assisting Madame Charlotte in cleaning up the palace servants. The pattern of 7 marquises had been formed since the succession of the 5th Grand Duke and had been stable until now. Perhaps in a few days there will only be 6 marquises left. Eating coarse food, Liszt's appetite was not very good. He still preferred to eat the food made by Mrs. Abbey. Then he observed the eldest prince and the second prince. To be precise, these 2 were only the sons of the Duke and had nothing to do with the princes. However, just as the daughter of the Sapphire Grand Duke was called a princess, they were also called princes. The eldest prince, Anthony Sapphire, was 32 years old and was known as the Ice Sword Saint. The second prince, Angus Sapphire, was 27 years old and was known as the Ice Spring Sword Saint. One was a veteran sword saint and the other was a newly promoted sword saint. To be able to be called a sword saint at this age, their aptitude was good. The 2 were very similar in appearance, but they were not handsome. The eldest prince's expression was more amiable, giving people a sense of closeness like a spring breeze. The second prince, who knew if it was because of the tragic destruction of the orders of chivalry, always had a cold face and kept strangers away. I heard from my cousin that Anthony and Angus became Sky Knight after the age of 20. Their talent is indeed good, but it can't be regarded as outstanding. With the unlimited resources of the Sapphire family, it is possible for them to become a Sky Knight before adulthood. Liszt only became an Earth Knight when he became an adult. Now that he was 17, he hoped to become a Sky Knight before he turned 20. Although they had lost at the starting line, they were destined to win at the finish line. Especially when he saw the eldest prince drinking with the nobles, still enjoying countless crowds and flattery, he felt very uncomfortable. He thought maliciously, maybe the Sapphire Dragon is already dead, and the Grand Duke is already in a terrible state, but his son is here talking and laughing. He picked up the glass of juice in front of him and took a sip. He then tasted the medium-well steak and suddenly felt very emotional. I keep feeling that this is not the right time to hold a banquet. Marquis Bull will not just sit and wait for his death. He must be up to something. It looks like I have to be more careful in this battle and not charge recklessly. Those who could plan to slaughter a dragon were definitely not easy to deal with. If you meet a soft persimmon, you must stab it. If you meet a tough one, you must learn to be humble. The steak was not delicious, but the juice tasted good. He drank half a glass of juice in one gulp. This banquet could barely be considered to be full. When he went back, he would replenish some of the 6-headed Hydra King's snake meat. Liszt looked at the nobles who were still flattering and toasting each other. He suddenly thought, if the Grand Duchy of Sapphire is really in chaos, will I have the opportunity to get the Dragon Knight Chi secret book from the Sapphire family? The Dragon Knight Chi secret book, written by the first Grand Duke, was left for his descendants to practice in the hope that one of them could become a Dragon Knight. Unfortunately, in the hands of the Sapphire family, no new Dragon Knight Chi secret book had been born. Liszt knew that he was a man destined to ride a dragon. Therefore this Dragon Knight Chi secret book was of great use to him. In this part of the sea, this was probably the only book on how to ride a dragon. Juniper Castle was surrounded by Milk Lake, and the knight could not charge. But it could not stop the knight. Early the next morning, the serfs of Ox Tendon City were driven to cut down the trees in the surrounding forest. One by one, logs were transported to Milk Lake, and rafts were thrown into Milk Lake. Countless wooden rafts were piled up, and soon the edge of Milk Lake was tightly covered. The layers of wooden rafts could completely withstand the weight of a galloping cavalry. Although the lake was huge, it could not stop the countless serfs from bustling about. Little by little, the surface of Milk Lake seemed to be covered by a cloth. It shrank at a speed visible to the naked eye and spread towards the island where Juniper Castle was located. Marquis Bull has not responded. The guards of Juniper Castle don't seem to be in a panic. On a nearby hill, Lee William put down his binoculars and said. List also put down his binoculars. Father, I feel that Marquis Bull is making a big move. Maybe he has given up on himself. List, you have to think in a positive direction. Levis's expression was relaxed. The army is pressing on and Marquis Bull can't resist. From the beginning, he assassinated the Sapphire Dragon and gambled with his life. Now he has obviously lost the gamble. Don't be too optimistic. The Count glanced at Levis and said, when dealing with the Golden Wheat family, remember to use your brain more, look at the problem carefully from all angles, and don't be blinded by love. For the past 2 days, Levis had been running to Marquis Roderick's tent every other day. Every day that he did not marry Rolia Golden Wheat family was another day that he felt uneasy, so he actively performed in front of his future father-in-law. Levis argued, Father, you worry too much. I just want to actively connect with the Golden Wheat family to deal with some bad things in the future. Actively connecting is a good thing, but don't show it. Don't become a gun and a sword in the hands of others. Learn to hide yourself. The Count suddenly sighed with emotion. You two brothers, Levis is too keen on socializing while List is too indifferent. List smiled and was confident and free. Because I believe in my own strength far more than unreliable socializing. Besides, leave the socializing to my brother. I will follow in the footsteps of my father and brother. As a dignified future Dragon Knight, he did not care about maintaining some aristocratic relations. Lee William shook his head, feeling a little powerless. Both his sons were very outstanding, but they had their own opinions and would not listen to him seriously. 3 days passed and on the 10th of July the sun was shining brightly. The Milk Lake was completely covered by the wooden raft. The eldest prince no longer hesitated and announced the attack on Juniper Castle. The Earth Knight assembled in the form of orders of chivalry and besieged the castle, while the Sky Knight flew high in the sky and launched a surprise attack. A mighty battle was about to begin. However, the island where Juniper Castle was located suddenly blossomed with a faint light. Then, a wave-like barrier appeared over the entire island, as if a large bowl had inverted the castle. The Earth Knight could not break through the barrier. The Sky Knight could only cause the barrier to shake violently. It's just a defensive magic circle. The sorcerers of the Goat Congregation can only create such an obstacle. Eldest Prince Anthony unsheathed his long sword and pointed it at the sky, full of pride. Everyone listen to my command. Charge with me, attack the magic barrier and crush it. Boom. Chapter 393. This chapter is Meow Kitty. Riding on the chocobo Loki's back, List didn't exert much strength. He just held the knight's spear and poked at the halo barrier. Magic was a very mysterious existence. Of course, anything related to magic, whether it was living creatures, magic or combat aura, was very mysterious. Some strange materials, together with the magician's runes, could be used to draw magic to form a special magic array. The halo barrier in front of him was such a magic array. It was similar to the water magic wave shield, but it wasn't made of water. After casting magic eyes, he saw that the color of the halo wasn't very obvious. It was chaos magic. It's probably a mixed type of magic array. While he was paddling, he had enough energy to observe the halo barrier in front of him. He could see the magic colors on the halo barrier. Some were dark, some were bright, and the contrast between light and dark outlined the network nodes like a spider web. Among them, the thickest lines were connected to different parts of the ground. If I cut off the nodes of these lines, I should be able to destroy the halo barrier, right? List's eyes lit up. He decided to experiment. He quickly signaled with the flag, change formation, attack the direction I'm guiding. Boom. He took the lead and attacked the nodes of the magic network, followed by the Black Orders of Chivalry's Knight. Each attack didn't seem to have much effect. But List could clearly see that with each attack, the thick magic lines dimmed a bit. Under the continuous attacks, the magic lines were almost about to collapse under the attacks of the Black Orders of Chivalry. Just then a loud horn blared from within the halo barrier, followed by the dull sound of hooves. Orders of Chivalry rode out of Castle Juniper on a red horse, galloping along the slope of the island towards the direction of the Black Orders of Chivalry. This was the elite Orders of Chivalry that belonged to Marquis Bull, the one who annihilated the Second Prince's 300 Blue Blood Orders of Chivalry, as well as the 800 Orders of Chivalry under Marquis Ramirez White Glutinous Rice and other suzerains. The wrathful Orders of Chivalry were the strongest Orders of Chivalry on Iron Hoof Island. Ironhoof Island was located in the southwest corner of the Grand Duchy. It was the closest location to the mainland and was known as the Grand Duchy's barrier. The furious orders of chivalry were the barrier within the barrier. His fame spread far and wide. Seeing the furious orders of chivalry attack, List's heart skipped a beat. He knew that his attack on the Halo barrier and the destruction of the nodes had been detected by the enemy spellcasters. He would not fight the furious orders of chivalry. These knights were elite Earth knights carefully trained by Marquis Bull. Many of them were drugged, and the horses they rode were not ordinary war horses. Even with Dosun's help, it would be difficult to destroy their formation. The Black Orders of Chivalry had no chance of winning. So, seeing the furious Orders of Chivalry attack, he quickly changed his flag signal and led the Black Orders of Chivalry to avoid the nodes and slack off in other directions. At the same time he shouted, "The furious Orders of Chivalry have attacked. The magic formation will not last long. Attack quickly. Destroy the furious Orders of Chivalry." The shout attracted the attention of many knights. The second prince, who was patrolling the battlefield, apparently also noticed it. He immediately led the Blue Blood Orders of Chivalry, who had been reassigned to his banner, and rushed toward the furious Orders of Chivalry. This was to complete his revenge. The Knight Torrent attack. Seeing that the two Orders of Chivalry, one red and one silver, were about to collide, the red furious Orders of Chivalry suddenly stopped. The silver Orders of Chivalry also immediately stopped in front of the Halo barrier. They confronted each other through the barrier. What a pity. Why didn't they attack? A few more times and the magic formation will definitely collapse. In the distance, List, who was slacking, saw the two Orders of Chivalry confronting each other and could not help but curse the second prince for being a coward. It looked like they were about to take revenge, but it turned out to be a confrontation of eyes. He had to cast magic eyes again, look for the next node and fiercely attack. Similarly, another furious Orders of Chivalry with red helmet, red armor, and red horse rushed toward List. This time, it was the Taro family's Orders of Chivalry with dazzling golden armor. The vanguard happened to be List's cousin Miopol Long Taro. With a flash in his eyes, List urged his horse to gallop over. "Sir Miopol." "Baron List." Miopol, who was confronting the furious Orders of Chivalry on the other side of the Halo barrier, could not help but glance at List, who was riding a strange bird. List approached and said in a low voice, "I found a problem. Just now, when I was attacking the Halo barrier on the second prince's side, the furious Orders of Chivalry directly rushed toward me. Then, when I attacked the Halo barrier on the other side, another furious Orders of Chivalry quickly rushed over. These two places must be the nodes of the entire Halo barrier." Had it been someone else, List would not have revealed such information so as not to expose his secret of magic eyes. But Miopol was his cousin and their relationship was pretty good. Even if Miopol suspected that Miopol was hiding a secret, List wouldn't get to the bottom of it. Moreover, List didn't mind giving the credit for breaking the Halo barrier to Miopol. In any case, with the threat of the furious Orders of Chivalry, Miopol didn't dare to attack the nodes at will. "Is that so?" Miopol was dubious. "Try it and you will know. I will support you from the side. If it succeeds, the Taro family will inevitably achieve the first meritorious service in capturing Castle Juniper." "All right, I will give it a try." Since he had already decided to marry the Grand Duke's youngest daughter, Miopol had a desire to express himself. Hearing List's words, he took advantage of the situation. "Charge." The elite Orders of Chivalry, equipped with orichalcum armor, instantly rushed toward the Halo barrier. On the opposite side, the furious Orders of Chivalry also instantly charged forward, with the momentum of perishing together. However, the Taro family's Orders of Chivalry still fiercely collided with the Halo barrier. With so many Orders of Chivalry present, Miopol wasn't worried about his own safety. The furious Orders of Chivalry couldn't scare him. Moreover, the opposite side's actions proved List's words that there was a problem with the barrier. Boom. The chi connected with the knight's knight spear and fiercely collided with the Halo barrier. The next moment, the originally intact Halo barrier suddenly flickered several times, seemingly on the verge of collapse, but it eventually stabilized. But this point made Miopol understand that what List said was correct. He raised his knight spear and turned his horse around. "Continue the charge." In the distance, the Crown Prince saw the flickering Halo barrier and shouted in excitement, "The magic array won't last long. All Orders of Chivalry, charge with all your might and flatten Castle Juniper." Flatten Castle Juniper. Flatten Castle Juniper. Flatten Castle Juniper. The effect of the node being attacked completely ignited the rhythm of the battlefield. The orders of chivalry surrounding Juniper Castle launched an even fiercer charge. They seemed to know that it was impossible. The two furious orders of chivalry hastily rushed back to Juniper Castle without looking back. Just as they returned to Juniper Castle, Meopal led his elite orders of chivalry to charge 3 times, thoroughly breaking the halo barrier. In a split second, a chain reaction occurred, and the entire halo barrier flickered violently. Soon after, it completely dissipated. Countless orders of chivalry shouted, "Charge! Charge! Charge!" List was mixed in the ranks, neither too fast nor too slow. He just cooperated with the shouting of slogans, but he wasn't willing to occupy the front row. At this time, the numerous orders of chivalry had just set foot on the shore of the island when the sky suddenly darkened. Thunder and lightning flashed, gales whistled, and a large number of hailstones, fireballs, rocks, and water arrows crazily shot out from Juniper Castle. Wizards of the Congregation of Goats. With a roar, the Crown Prince raised his sword and soared, directly charging towards a rock falling from the sky. Foolish and ignorant. This is the era of the night. Boom. The sword filled with chi slashed out, splitting the rock into pieces. The Crown Prince's figure was high in the air, his black cloak fluttering in the wind, his imposing manner unparalleled. Under his leadership, one Sky Knight after another rushed out from the orders of chivalry and soared into the air, starting to bombard Juniper Castle indiscriminately. Chapter 394. This chapter is, My Horse Feeds the Goats. There had to be a reason why the era chose the knight to rule the world. The current battle scene vividly displayed the disadvantage of the magicians. When the orders of chivalry charged, when the Sky Knight soared into the air, the free mana in the air became chaotic, and the great magicians could no longer release the magic they were so proud of. Fort Juniper's seemingly overwhelming counterattack vanished in the blink of an eye, leaving only the shouts of the knight. Arrows imbued with combat energy continuously struck the walls of Fort Juniper, peeling off the hard rocks that were watered with glutinous rice juice. There were only sporadic counterattacks from within the fort. Under the siege of nearly 10,000 knight, the knights could not even lift their heads and were suppressed to the point of suffocation. Moreover, there was still the Sky Knight bombing from a fixed point. As he soared into the air, he swung his long sword, and every time he struck, he would be able to repel the last bit of counterattack. The battle was just as everyone had expected before the banquet began. It was a one-sided situation. Fort Juniper was in imminent danger. List, who was slacking off, watched as the Sky Knight attacked from the air and the Earth Knight attacked from the ground. The combined attacks of land and air could destroy Fort Juniper at any time. He could not help but feel anxious. How could this be? It's completely different from what I imagined. The Marquis Bull has no way of fighting back. The knights who were angry at the orders of chivalry were suppressed in the fort, not daring to show their faces. The magicians of the Goat Gathering had also disappeared without a trace. The countdown to the end of the war. Tick-tock, tick-tock. How unlucky I guessed wrong. List's annoyance only lasted for a few seconds. He immediately raised his swift shadow bow and shouted, "Black orders of chivalry, attack Fort Juniper with all your might." He was going to seize the credit. If not now, when? 3 arrows infused with fire-attributed energy shot toward the wall of Juniper Castle and blasted off a piece of rock. List shook his head. He was not satisfied with this result. He whistled and Dosen, who was in the middle of the Black Orders of Chivalry, immediately rushed over. Dosen had been in the limelight for the past few days. Many nobles came to visit Dosen on the pretext of socializing. In fact, raising an intermediate World of Warcraft to participate in battle wasn't rare. Many Sky Knight mounts were World of Warcraft, and there were even intermediate World of Warcraft that could fly. Marquis Ramirez White Glutinous Rice's mount was an intermediate World of Warcraft Overlord Beetle that could fly and release lightning. At this moment he was standing on the Overlord Beetle's head, casting his skills while commanding the Overlord Beetle to release lightning. The advantage of World of Warcraft was that he could use his own mana to cast spells. Naturally, Dosen could also cast spells. Dosen rock grenades. Boom. Huge rocks smashed into the walls of Castle Juniper, creating many cracks. In terms of siege power, Dosen could laugh at everyone present. Boom. 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 With Dosen's rock grenades and arrows, the Black Orders of Chivalry's main attack area of the castle quickly collapsed, creating a small gap. The angry Knight of Orders of Chivalry stood at the gap and used his shield to block the knight's charge. Dosun panted heavily as he ran out of mana. List held the swift shadow bow and continued to shoot, hoping to take a few heads from afar. At this moment he saw the eldest prince descending from the sky and landing beside him. His expression under the mask was not clear, and his eyes were also blocked by the sunlight. However, the eldest prince sounded very excited. "You are Lee William's son, Levis? Levis is my brother. I am Earl Lee William's second son, List. I've heard of you, List." The eldest prince just landed to rest for a while. The Sky Knight could not fly for a long time. "This dog you raised is not bad. You have made an important contribution to the capture of Castle Juniper. Thank you, eldest prince." List immediately changed to an excited tone. "I'm willing to charge for the Sapphire family." "Very good." After saying this, the eldest prince flew into the sky and went straight to the gap blocked by the angry orders of chivalry. He fiercely waved his long sword, and the ice-attributed chi instantly condensed into countless ice cones. Together with the long sword, he slashed at the knight at the gap. Bang! The shields supported by more than a dozen elite Earth Knights were violently shaken back and fell on the walkway of the castle. But before the eldest prince could rush in, a cyan sword pierced out and went straight for the eldest prince. Clang! The eldest prince blocked the sneak attack with his sword and said in a cold voice, "Arthas, are you betraying the Sapphire family like your father? Have you forgotten all about our friendship in the past? I'll give you a chance now. Surrender to me and I guarantee you will live." The one who sneak attacked him was the son of Marquis Bull, Arthas Sapphire. He was also a Sky Knight at the Sacred Swordsman level. His title was Sacred Swordsman of Hurricane. "Father's decision is my decision," Arthas responded coldly. He then returned to the gap and continued to summon elite Earth Knights to block the gap. Disappointment and loss. The eldest prince landed on the ground with a frosty face and roared, "Attack, everyone attack! I want to see Castle Juniper fall in half an hour." Rumble. The battle around the gap in the castle became white-hot. The Sky Knights rushed at the gap one after another and fought with the Sky Knights in Castle Juniper, each using a high-level chi secret technique. Although the battle was in a stalemate for a while, as the castle walls continued to collapse and the gap grew larger, the Sky Knights in Castle Juniper became weaker and weaker. List had already run out of arrows. He stopped attacking on his chocobos and watched the Sky Knights fight. Hundreds of Sky Knights, almost 4/5 of the Grand Duchy of Sapphire Sky Knights, were here. A few Sky Knights here used up their chi and landed to recover, while a few other Sky Knights joined in the battle. They maintained a constant suppression of Castle Juniper. Sea Swordsman Lee William was among them. As a Sacred Swordsman level Sky Knight, his performance was outstanding. Apart from a few veteran Perfect Swordsman level Sky Knights, he was probably one of the strongest Sacred Swordsmen. This Battle of Castle Juniper will probably be recorded in the history of the Grand Duchy of Sapphire. This is an epic battle. List's blood was boiling. He wished he could immediately return to the Flower Town study and take out the Dragon Wars in the Wild Chronicle book and write it again. He wrote down the battle. When Dragon Knight List was young, he participated in the Battle of Castle Juniper. He took the lead and broke through Castle Juniper's defenses. As an elite Earth Knight, he accomplished what a group of Sky Knights could not. Subsequently, with his help, the Grand Duchy of Sapphire's Knights captured Castle Juniper. Immediately after, he felt that he had to add, the eldest son of the Sapphire Grand Duke personally pays his highest tribute to List. However, just when everyone felt that victory was in their grasp and that Castle Juniper was about to be captured, suddenly dark clouds rolled over the castle. The sun disappeared in the clouds and the sky suddenly became gloomy. Immediately afterward, a blue light shot out from the highest spire of Castle Juniper and pierced the dark clouds. Rumble, 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 rumble of thunder shook the dark clouds. Such a huge change made all the knights pause their attacks. Staring at the bright blue light, the surging atmosphere of war instantly stagnated. "Anthony, are you so eager for your uncle to die?" There was only one voice between heaven and earth. It seemed to come from the castle and the dark clouds. The next moment, the light converged. The angry orders of chivalry at the gap in the castle inexplicably cheered and made way. 10 seconds later, a tall figure appeared at the gap. A figure that was twice as tall as a normal person. A pitch-black armor covered his whole body from head to toe. However, the front of the bullhead-shaped helmet and the eye area were emitting blue flames, looking cold and grim. In the hands of the tall figure was a curved greatsword. To be precise, it was a curved greatsword made of bone, which was also emitting blue flames. Pitch-black armor. Blue flames. and a huge figure that was twice as tall as a person. All of them exuded a great sense of oppression. He just stood there, but not a single knight dared to attack him. No one had recovered from the shock. They had seen tall humans, but they had never seen a human twice as tall as a normal person. Not to mention that his eyes could emit blue flames. Chapter 395. Lich. This term, or rather this artificial creature, originated from ancient times, possibly from the Moon Empire. Yes, everything in this world would eventually be related to the Moon Empire. It was as if there was only one human country in ancient times, and that was the Moon Empire. In some of the magic books of the magicians, the Moon Empire was a country that pursued magic, and thus gave birth to a variety of magic professions. As recorded in the book, To His Highness Annette, Curtis Truth, which he obtained from the ghost ship, the triangular pattern around the Eye of Truth had alchemists, vampires, necromancers, magicians, druids, wizards, enchanters, prophets, succubi, shamans, and other professions. All the professions were annihilated in the long river of history, and only the magicians continued. According to List's summary and search, the Lich originated from the wizards of the Moon Empire. Wizards were generally mages who studied soul technology. There was an ancient wizard who researched phylactery technology that could be used to imbue the soul, and transformed himself into an immortal Lich. After that, the Lich flourished for a period of time. Of course, immortality probably didn't exist because in this era, there were no signs of the existence of Lich. Those ancient Lich had long become a speck of dust between heaven and earth. Even dragons couldn't live forever, so how could an artificial creature like the Lich pry into the secret of immortality? It was probably a technology that could prolong one's life. But from the looks of it, the Lich transformed from Andy Sapphire seems a little unusual. Compared to the form of a Lich like Curtis Truth, Lich Andy seems to have a stronger aura. He's actually as tall as two people, and even the great sword in his hand is emitting blue flames. List looked at the gap in Juniper Castle, where Marquis Bull was talking to the eldest prince. He became nervous. He guessed that Marquis Bull would have a backup plan, but he didn't expect that the result would be Marquis Bull successfully transforming into a Lich and appearing in front of everyone with an invincible posture. The battlefield fell into a stagnant atmosphere. The eldest prince, Anthony, landed on the ground and looked up at the tall Lich Andy. His voice was cold. Liches are nothing but trash eliminated by the times. There are no immortals in the world and you are the same. Andy, your self-deceiving behavior won't scare anyone. Ah, what a joke. Lich Andy lightly waved the large sword in his hand. The design of this sword was very cool. The blade was like a bone, and the hilt was a metal bull's head. The pair of bull's horns were the sword guard, and the blue flames burned coldly. I'm not trying to scare you because I'm coming to kill you. Boom. The Lich Andy jumped down from Juniper Castle, and the ground shook under his feet. The eldest prince could not help but feel a sense of fear, but he quickly shouted, "All Knight, throw your spears and arrows at this Lich. Sky Knight, attack him with me. Do you really want to go against me?" When Lich Andy saw the surrounding orders of chivalry preparing to attack, he immediately shouted, "I have become a Lich and seized the power of the Sapphire Dragon. My existence proves that the Sapphire Dragon is dead. Do you still choose to be buried with the Sapphire family?" His words immediately made orders of chivalry's movement stagnate. The dragon-slaying incident had already happened. Now that Marquis Bull had successfully become a Lich, there was no doubt that he had stolen the power of the Sapphire Dragon. So, what happened to this dragon that suppressed the country? Everyone would have doubts in their hearts. However, the eldest prince quickly refuted, "The power of a dragon is not something you can covet. The Sapphire Dragon is safe and sound. Soon, it will recover from its injuries and kill the dregs that dare to provoke its majesty." After saying that, the eldest prince directly rushed towards Lich Andy. At this moment, List sincerely admired the heir to the Duke. Not only did he not shrink back on such an occasion, but he also rushed forward without hesitation. He tried to take the lead and directly influence the judgment of the surrounding knight. On the contrary, the second prince beside him did not rush out with the eldest prince immediately. The newly promoted sacred swordsman hesitated and wavered. This battle is a bit difficult. List also had thoughts of retreating. He did not know how strong the Lich transformed by Marquis Bull was, but the success of the Marquis Bull could easily make people think of the safety of the Sapphire Dragon, and thus give rise to hesitation. Just like now, only the eldest prince rushed out alone. Even the second prince's heart wavered. The scales of victory had already tilted towards Marquis Bull and the new Lich Andy. Once the eldest prince's attack tested Andy's strength, there would probably be a huge change in the battlefield. Thinking of the escape route that he had long thought of, List could not help but sigh self-deprecatingly in his heart. Nobles are the best at seeking good fortune and avoiding disaster. But the next moment, he found that his understanding of the nobles was still very superficial. In the camp, the second Sky Knight rushed out after the eldest prince. This Sky Knight was dressed in golden armor and held a golden greatsword in his hand. The one who was dressed so flashily was none other than the uncle of the useless Sky Knight who relied on potions to become a normal-level Sky Knight, Mesiro Longtaro. His eyes froze and he could not react for a moment. He did not have time to react either. Soon he realized that his father, the wave swordsman Li William, was the third to rush out after Mesiro. Following that, the Sky Knights rushed out one after another. The second prince was among them and all of them rushed towards Lich Andy. When Lich Andy saw this scene he couldn't help but curse, "Stupid ants. It seems that you do not understand that your current actions are equivalent to suicide." Boom. He raised his greatsword that was covered in blue flames and lightly swept it across. A circle of blue shockwaves spread out in a fan shape and quickly hit the bodies of many Sky Knights. The Sky Knights were instantly pushed back like a small boat being overturned by a wave. Li William was among the ranks that were pushed back, but he was not injured. He was only hit by a huge force and his ribs were aching. After catching his breath, he rushed forward again. Coincidentally, the eldest prince was beside him who was also sent flying. He looked at the eldest prince and the eldest prince looked back at him. Without any words or eye contact, the two of them quickly went into a new battle. This was going to be a difficult battle. Lightning, hail, gravel, wind blades, flames and waves. Other than the rarer light and dark battle energy, the other 6 types of battle energy appeared in the sky. The magic in the air was crushed by the knight's own battle energy, creating all kinds of strange phenomena. Lich Andy roared angrily in the midst of such a wild attack. His greatsword that was covered in blue flames actually blocked the group attack and still had the strength to counterattack. Whoosh! The greatsword that was covered in blue flames suddenly made a turn, and an ordinary Sky Knight who could not dodge in time was grazed in the chest by the greatsword. Blood splattered and quickly evaporated. Ah! The Sky Knight screamed and retreated. He could not even block one of Lich Andy's sword. The gap was so big that it was terrifying. The Earth Knights surrounding Fort Juniper did not even dare to intervene in the battle. This was a battle between the top knight forces. Lich Andy seemed to be a magically created creature, but his fighting style was still that of a knight. Mixed in the midst of the orders of chivalry, List raised the swift shadow bow several times and then put it down again. With the Count joining the battle, the position of the Tulip family was quickly determined. The Coral Islands orders of chivalry had no way out and could only fight. But this battle was not something that an elite Earth Knight like him could participate in. Even sneak attacks with bows and arrows would be very difficult. Chapter 396. In World of Warcraft, Lich King Arthas had a godly weapon called Frostmourne. Now that Marquis Bull had a similar greatsword that emitted blue flames, it reminded List of another godly weapon called Happy Flames. Of course, this sword wasn't called that, but it wasn't weak in the slightest. Fighting dozens of Sky Knights alone, Marquis Bull's support was only 7 or 8 Sky Knights from Castle Juniper. But even so, Marquis Bull still had the upper hand. His greatsword that emitted blue flames could severely injure a Sky Knight from time to time. How can an ant understand the power of a lich? Marquis Bull laughed sinisterly as he slashed out with his sword. A Sky Knight couldn't dodge in time and had his arm cut off on the spot. He was completely crippled, screaming as he fell to the ground. Fortunately, the knights on the ground rushed over and rescued him in time, saving his life. But he was just the beginning. A minute later, another Sky Knight was heavily injured. Half of his waist was slashed by the greatsword that emitted blue flames, almost cutting him in half. If not for his high-grade chi forcefully stopping the bleeding, he would probably have died. "Commander, what should we do?" Captain Lydon was extremely anxious. The situation on the battlefield had already exceeded the scope of elite Earth Knights like him. List gestured for him to calm down and directly ran towards Levis. "Sir Levis." "Baron List." Levis led the red and yellow orders of chivalry and did not move either, but his expression was as blank and anxious as Captain Lydon's. "Are you planning to escape?" "What?" Levis screamed and then lowered his voice. "Are you crazy? Father is fighting right now. He still had family and rationality. He wasn't scared out of his wits by the battlefield. Liszt calmed himself down and said directly, "We can't interfere in the Sky Knight's battle, but Castle Juniper is right in front of us. Since Father has decided to fight, we shouldn't stop." Levis waved his hand. "If you have a plan, just say it. Why are you still hesitating at a time like this? Very good. Contact the Orders of Chivalry immediately. We will avoid the main battlefield and continue to attack Fort Juniper." Liszt's voice was calm. His nervousness didn't make him lose his mind. On the contrary, his mind became more active. He looked at Levis, who seemed to be grasping at a life-saving straw, and said in a clear voice, "We must advance and retreat together with Father. This means that we must have the faith to win. In that case, they could not lose the credit for conquering Castle Juniper. You contact the Golden Wheats family, I'll contact the Taro family." "We can take it down," Liszt immediately interrupted. "Nonsense, can't you see the gap in the castle? If everyone attacks together, no matter how big the castle is, we can flatten it. Hurry up and contact them." Levis clenched his teeth and obeyed Liszt's arrangement. The two brothers, one on the left and one on the right, began to contact the leaderless Orders of Chivalry. The Sky Knights had all run off to fight the Lich Andy, and no one paid attention to the small Castle Juniper. However, Liszt could clearly see that Castle Juniper was absolutely the key. There were two reasons. The first was that the Lich had a phylactery. According to Curtis Truth's situation, the phylactery wasn't fatal and was only the coordinates of her return from the land of exile. But this wasn't necessarily the case for Andy's phylactery. The second reason was that conquering Castle Juniper would at least disturb Marquis Bull's mentality. After all, it was his lair. There might be a lot of wealth inside as well as many wizards from the Goat Assembly. The connection went smoothly. Meopel immediately nodded. "I understand. I will contact the other families. With our strength we can directly capture Castle Juniper." About 5 minutes later, the battle in the sky reached its climax. More than 10 Sky Knights were heavily injured, and the Bull Marquis had also been hit a few times. His armor was damaged and even more blue flames appeared. At the same time, with the Knight of the Taro family and the Golden Wheatear family taking the lead, the Orders of Chivalry once again charged towards Castle Juniper. The elite Earth Knights climbed the gap one after another and started a fierce battle with the furious Orders of Chivalry. With their lords fighting in the sky, the Earth Knights on the ground naturally didn't dare to slack off. Especially the heir of the family. In order to share the burden of his father, he couldn't wait to capture Castle Juniper. Liszt mixed in with the charging troops. He wasn't too high profile, nor was he greedy for this bit of achievement. The series of attacks originated from him, so in any case, his share of the achievement was indispensable. Moreover, the first prince had already affirmed his other achievement in the siege. He was in the limelight. As long as they won the war, the title of Viscount would be theirs. If he were to be too high profile now, he wouldn't even know how he died if the Marquis Bull were to casually strike him. The battle in the sky and the castle was in full swing. Around Castle Juniper, the climax of the epic battle rose one after another. 15 minutes later, the Orders of Chivalry finally broke through the blockade of the furious Orders of Chivalry and rushed into Castle Juniper. They began a frenzied massacre of the castle's personnel. "Ants? How dare you?" The Marquis Bull noticed the situation in Castle Juniper. He turned around and roared, wanting to rush over to stop it. However, he was entangled by the first prince and the other Sky Knights. As they became familiar with the Marquis Bull's strength, the Sky Knights didn't continue to lose members. They were barely able to stabilize their position and stall the Marquis Bull. The first prince soared into the sky and roared, "Knights, flatten Castle Juniper. I am with you. Flatten Castle Juniper. Flatten Castle Juniper." The Orders of Chivalry shouted slogans and began an even more frenzied attack. Liszt also shouted a few times and led Yunus and the other elite Earth Knights into the castle. He didn't go in any direction, instead he looked for the Marquis Bull's study. In his view, the importance of knowledge was far greater than the castle's other wealth. With magic eyes he could easily avoid powerful opponents. The elite Earth Knights blocked his way, so he directly bypassed them and specifically dealt with the weak ordinary Earth Knights. Soon, he rushed to the 3rd floor of the castle and found the location of the study. "Yunus, guard the door, I have something to look for." "Hurry up." There were bookshelves in the study neatly stacked with books, but Liszt didn't rummage through them. They were mostly decorative objects, just like the bookshelves in the Flower Town. He looked at the desk. The most important secret books, the ones that the Marquis Bull often read, must be on the desk. Sure enough, there was a stack of books on the desk. On the top, Liszt glimpsed the title of the book, A Night in the Piano Room with Miss Havana. He didn't think much about it and directly stuffed the stack of books into the gem space. He found several books from other corners and stuffed them into the gem space without looking at them. There was a set of silver-white knight armor hanging on the wall. He took it off without hesitation and stuffed it into the gem space. The armor that could be stored in this study was definitely not ordinary. Chapter 397. This chapter is called Heavenly Sword Dancing Fragrance. 10,000 Rewards. Strictly speaking, Castle Juniper was only a vacation castle of Marquis Bull, which was absolutely incomparable to the Castle of Bulls in the Iron Hoof City, so there were not many important properties here. Those properties should have been moved overseas with the other son of Marquis Bull and his grandson. There were not many discoveries in the bedroom, and the bedside table was also opened by him. It was full of sundries, but there were no books. However, right above the bedside wall, there was a portrait of the wife of Duke Bull, a middle-aged woman. The woman had a necklace around her neck. In the vision of the magic eye, the pink gem inlaid under the necklace turned out to be real. He easily removed the gem and put it into the gem space. After carefully observing again and finding no magic items, he hurriedly came out and said in a calm voice, "It's all empty. There is nothing good left in this castle. This is just a place where Marquis Bull took refuge. There will certainly be no wealth," Jonas said matter-of-factly. "Let's go and find the Goat Assembly's wizards." Jonas said excitedly, "Good. Killing a great wizard is almost enough for me to make up for the loss this time." The contribution of a great wizard was enough to make up for the losses of the Grey Orders of Chivalry. The two immediately led the elite Earth Knight to search the castle. When they encountered the angry Orders of Chivalry Knight, they immediately surrounded them and slashed them. The castle was full of the smell of blood, and the blood almost flooded every floor. From the third floor to the first floor, they did not find the Goat Assembly's wizards. Just as Liszt frowned, Paris's voice came to his ear, "Lord Baron, follow me." Liszt immediately led the knight and followed the invisible Paris. Others could not see Paris, but he could. Under Paris's lead, they quickly came to the depths of the castle. This was an ordinary warehouse, but on one wall of the warehouse hung a huge goat logo, which seemed to be faintly glowing. Liszt used the Sky Cutter sword to pick up the curtain-like logo and saw a flashing magic formation behind it. Behind the magic array was a pitch-black tunnel that extended underground. Liszt, these magicians from the goat gathering must have escaped through this tunnel. Eunice frowned and threw a chair over. Patter. When the chair came into contact with the threads of light that formed the magic array, it shattered into pieces. Liszt, on the other hand, knocked on the wall where the magic circle was, and heard the sound of metal clanking. "It's a wall made of metal. Unless we destroy the castle, it will be very difficult to remove the magic circle. Judging from the strength of its magic power, it won't be broken in a short time. This is troublesome. Let's try attacking first." Liszt was unwilling to give up. If they could really capture a few great magicians, it would definitely be a huge achievement. But in the next moment he changed his mind. With a loud rumble, the castle swayed as if it would collapse at any moment. Following that, the Marquis Bull's furious roar rang out, "A bunch of ants, how dare you destroy my castle? You must be tired of living. Scram. Ramirez, you damned worm, wait a few more minutes and I guarantee that you will become a corpse to feed your damned worms." Rumble. 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 The castle continued to shake. Marquis Bull had found an opportunity to charge in, fending off the attacks of the Sky Knight while slaughtering the Earth Knight. Paris quickly returned after investigating the situation, and anxiously said to Liszt, "Lord Baron, Marquis Bull has charged in." He looked at the stable magic array unwillingly, waved his hand and ordered, "Let's move quickly and leave the castle. Marquis Bull has already charged back. It's too dangerous to stay here." Thinking of the scene of Marquis Bull fighting a group of Sky Knight alone, the Earth Knight could not help but feel a chill down their backs. They quietly followed Liszt to find the exit and quietly left Juniper Castle. At this time, there were still a large number of orders of chivalry surrounding Juniper Castle. They wanted to charge into the castle, but they did not have the opportunity. Liszt returned to the black orders of chivalry that he had left outside, mounted his chocobo Loki, and hurriedly went to look for Levis and Meopel. He did not see the two, so he had the two knight followers enter the castle to look for them. "Bring them out. Marquis Bull is extremely dangerous, they are courting death by staying inside." "Understood, Baron Liszt." After doing all this, Liszt let out a long sigh of relief. He felt that he had done his best and could no longer affect the outcome of the battle. Let's see if these marquises and earls can defeat Lich Andy. I hope the earls can come out unscathed. In any case, Lee William was his greatest backer. Rumble. Thump thump. Juniper Castle was already riddled with holes. The battle between the Sky Knight and the Lich Andy was still ongoing. As the heavily injured Sky Knights were carried out of the castle, the Marquis Bull's angry roars gradually became subdued. But soon he let out another loud roar. It pierced everyone's eardrums. "Oh, my son. Arthas." The Marquis Bull roared as it rushed out of the window. The black armor on its tall body was already in tatters. Every crack on the armor was emitting blue flames, but the flames were much dimmer than before. It was impossible to guess whether the flames were his body or a manifestation of magic power. "I will remember every one of you." He turned around and brandished his sword. A blue shockwave burst forth from his sword, repelling the pursuing Sky Knight. His other hand was carrying a person. From the looks of it, it was his son, the Hurricane Swordmaster Arthas Sapphire. His body was drooping, no longer breathing. "Foolish traitor Andy, you will embrace death just like Arthas." There were 2 obvious wounds on the eldest prince's body, but he was still full of fighting spirit. "You don't even have the right to go to the banished land." Rumble. Another few Sky Knights rested and flew up into the sky. They then descended from the sky to attack the Marquis Bull who was being held back. The Marquis Bull panted and roared, "When I completely grasp the power of the Sapphire Dragon, no one below the Dragon Knight level will be able to stop me. When that time comes, I will reap your heads." Then he leaped high into the sky and sped away. He was ready to escape. His speed was like a bolt of lightning, far exceeding the speed of all the Sky Knights. He only left behind one sentence: "I will be back." The Marquis Bull has escaped. List heaved a sigh of relief. If the Lich Andy could not find his phylactery, it would be very difficult to kill him. He might even risk his life to severely injure most of the Sky Knights. Now that he had escaped, he would not be a threat for the time being. Chapter 398. Cough cough. The smoke and dust dispersed. Marquis Bull coughed weakly and could not get up. The Sky Knight formed a circle and surrounded him, but everyone's focus was no longer on Marquis Bull, but on the edge of the dark clouds in the northwest. There. A flying creature that looked like a bird and a bat was leisurely flying over. Judging from its flight trajectory and silhouette, many people's hearts were pounding, including List. It's a dragon," Levis exclaimed. The flying creature did indeed have a dragon-like silhouette. It was similar to the invisible dragon that List had seen before. "Dragon!" someone suddenly shouted. This was followed by bursts of cheers. "It's a dragon. The Sapphire Dragon. The Grand Duke is finally here. The dragon is still alive." The eldest prince, who surrounded Marquis Bull, laughed. "The Sapphire Dragon, the authority of the Sapphire family, it's still alive. Andy the traitor, your end is here." "No, cough cough, how could it be? My power is fading. How could the Sapphire Dragon be still alive?" Marquis Bull's terrified words were intermittent. The blue flames on his body seemed to be blown away by the wind, dissipating in the direction of the dragon. The second prince lifted his mask, looking crazy. "It's Lord Father." "Ah, Lord Father is riding the Sapphire Dragon." He suddenly raised the long sword in his hand and pointed it at Marquis Bull. "Today I will take back all the humiliation you imposed on me." "Ah. Impossible, impossible, impossible." Marquis Bull did not look at the second prince. His eyes, which were burning with blue flames, stared at the flying creature that was getting bigger and bigger. "Familiar magic, it's really it. Impossible. Why is the Sapphire Dragon not dead?" Following his line of sight, everyone raised their heads and looked at the Sapphire Dragon, which had completely revealed itself. But unlike the Sapphire Dragon in their imagination, the Sapphire Dragon was now ferocious. Large pieces of skin and flesh had decayed, and the flesh had turned outwards from the decayed wounds. In some places the bones were even visible. A pale blue light was released on the exposed bones, adding a lot of horror to the Sapphire Dragon. If the dragon did not have 2 wings, it had 4 legs. It had 4 legs, 2 shorter front legs and 2 thicker back legs. However, not only was the Sapphire Dragon festering all over, but one of its 4 legs was also broken, and the other hind leg was only left with bones that glowed blue. The waving wings that covered the sky were even more tattered. The membranes of the wings were filled with holes of various sizes, like linen clothes that had decayed for many years. Although it also had dragon scales with a crystalline luster similar to those of the elves, and the blue color was very obvious as if it was made of jade, it was still the ugliest dragon that List had ever seen. It was just like, it looks like it was splashed with sulfuric acid. How did it become like this? List swallowed a mouthful of saliva, goosebumps rising all over his body, just like when he first saw the invisible dragon. Dosen's dog hair stood up, and Loki's feathers stood on end. The surrounding orders of chivalry's horses became irritable, and if it were not for the knight pulling them, they would definitely turn around and run. Unlike the magic outline of the dragon he saw last time, this time List saw a real dragon, the sapphire dragon that suppressed the Grand Duchy of Sapphire. Levis described to me that the sapphire dragon is a magical and incredible creature that combines beauty and power. However, the sapphire dragon in front of him was a completely disfigured dragon. Was it caused by the Marquis Bull's sneak attack, or did something happen when the Sapphire Grand Duke was treating it? Doubts swirled in his mind. The next moment, the sapphire dragon, wrapped in a strong wind, descended from the sky and landed in the open space left after the Sky Knight dispersed, facing the Marquis Bull lying on the ground. The dragon landed on both feet and supported its body. It was about 4 stories high and its wingspan was probably more than 50 meters. After shrinking, it was still the size of a building. It was many times larger than the invisible dragon that List had seen, and its dragon's might was also many times stronger. It was so oppressive that List had the illusion of suffocation. He endured the discomfort, cast magic eyes, and observed the sapphire dragon in another way. There was a vigorous blue light in its body, but it was not water magic. The magic had huge broken sections on the surface of its body, and each broken section corresponded to a rotten part. It was supposed to be a beautiful treasure, but because of these broken sections, its aura was messy. It aimed at the frightened Marquis Bull on the ground, opened its mouth and made to bite down. List could clearly see the same blue light in the Marquis Bull's body. These lights were visible to the naked eye, and they quickly converged on the sapphire dragon, repairing the broken sections of magic in its body. Just as the sapphire dragon was about to bite the Marquis Bull, a majestic voice sounded, "Sapphire, be patient." The next moment, the sapphire dragon stopped its big mouth and roared unwillingly. It was as if there was thunder in the sky, and there was a faint elephant's roar. It was a strange but powerful cry. Bang! A figure jumped down from the connection between the sapphire dragon's neck and back and landed on the ground. He was wearing silver-white armor, a blue cloak and flaxen hair. He was neither tall nor short and he did not wear a helmet. His face could be seen and it was very ordinary. List only looked at him a little and felt a pressure similar to that of the sapphire dragon coming from him. It turned into a pair of big hands, strangling his throat, and gave him the illusion of suffocation again. Whoosh! List forced his chi to dispel this uncomfortable feeling. At the same time, under the leadership of the eldest prince, all the Sky Knights had knelt on one knee and shouted, "Grand Duke!" Immediately after, the Earth Knights, including List, also knelt on one knee. Grand Duke. In the entire battlefield, the only human standing was Sapphire Grand Duke. He nodded lightly and a faint smile hung on his face. "Everyone rise. It seems that I came at the right time. You have successfully vented my anger." When the knight stood up, he looked at the dazed Marquis Bull, who seemed to be unable to accept reality. His smile disappeared and he became calm. "Andy, my most trusted companion, comrade and relative. I never thought that one day we would meet in such a way. Why is the Sapphire Dragon not dead?" Marquis Bull asked in a daze. Shaking his head, Sapphire Grand Duke did not speak. He just walked straight to Marquis Bull and then squatted in front of him. He seemed to sigh slightly. He stretched out his left hand and suddenly opened it. His fingertips suddenly turned into beast-like nails, and he stabbed them into Marquis Bull's chest. Marquis Bull screamed. Sapphire Grand Duke was unmoved. He pulled with all his strength, and a blue gem about the size of a fist was pulled out from his chest. His hand returned to normal. You're tuning in to the Han Lee's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.